She
couldn't hear you, she was talking.
Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to call to order this Perrysburg Schools regular Board of Education meeting on Monday, June 17th, 2024. And Mr. Drew, your roll call, please.
Dr. Rufford.
Here.
Ms. Roland Miller.
Here.
Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Mr. Bennington.
Here.
Ms. Minke.
And first order of business, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we've got some visitors tonight, so we'll do the safety briefing next. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and we thank you for attending tonight's Board of Education meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors. You are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting Perrysburg Schools. Right, got a busy agenda tonight, so we're getting ourselves kicked off here on time. So can I have a motion to accept the proposed agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Dr. Ruffert and Ms. Larimer? Roll call, please.
Dr. Rufford.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Ms. Roland Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, the agenda as proposed is adopted. Okay, next we got, as we're actually into the summertime, still more board recognitions, which is great. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Hostler.
Thank you. So we're very excited this evening to introduce our head women's track coach, Coach Edge, who will introduce the state qualifiers for our high school track team, which basically performed in the first Friday and Saturday in June. So we'll turn it over to Coach Edge.
Well, I would like to start by thanking the board and Mr. Hostler for providing us this opportunity to kind of showcase the girls and incredible athletes. I'd like to thank the high school coaching staff and Mr. Daco and Mr. Cookson for doing all they do to support our program. And a program our size can't be successful without great coaches that help us out. So a quick shout out to Coach Gossett, Coach Monon, Coach Lipkin as well, Coach Wendy Woods, Coach Anderson, and all the volunteer coaches we have that help these ladies and all the gentlemen kind of get where they need to go.
Coach Edge, if I could interrupt, could you turn your microphone on, please? So we can hear you fine, but the recording, and I apologize for interrupting your flow.
Oh, that's better. I'm not starting over, though. All right, so again, thanks to everybody who is a part of this program and has done great things for us. Sending as many athletes as we can to the state meet has been a goal of our program each and every year. This year, we were able to achieve that goal in many unexpected ways and exceeding our preseason expectations. We qualified 3 relays, the 4x1, the 4x4, and the 4x8, in addition to 3 athletes in individual events. With that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce the 2024 Perrysburg Track and Field State Qualifiers. The girls 4x8 team of Hannah Kirsten, Natalie Sanders, Laura Vallette, and Ava Beeks. We have Natalie and Hannah with us today. So come on up, ladies. The girls ran a 9:21, finishing 9th in the state. This is the 3rd consecutive year that Hannah has attended the state track meet in the 4x8, and this is Natalie's 9th consecutive time attending a state meet across 3 sports. She's done track, cross country, and swimming. Hannah competed as an individual in 3200. This was her 2nd year doing that. She beat her time and place last year, running a 10:55.7 on her way to 6th place finish, earning all Ohio honors. And Hannah will be continuing her academic and athletic career at Cornell University in the fall. We have a couple of athletes, obviously, that aren't here with us. Ava Beeks ran on our 4x8 as well as Laura Vallette. Ava Beeks qualified in the 800 as well. She finished in a time of 2:19 and finished in 15th place. Next, I'd like to introduce our 4x1, Ava Kincaid, Kinsley Jones, Camille Francis, and Emma Ogdahl. These ladies ran a 49.91, earning a 17th place finish at the state meet. In my time on the staff, this is the first time that we sent a 4x1 to state, so that was a pretty big accomplishment for them. On the way to making it to the state meet, they broke the school record at the regional meet, and that was a pretty cool thing. Ava will be running and continuing her athletic and academic career at Ohio University in the fall. And finally, I'd like to introduce our 4x4 team. McKenna Conley leading off. Camille Francis is on our 4x4, as well as qualifying in individual events in the 300 hurdles. She's also on our 4x1. Ava Beeks was also on our 4x4, as well as Laura Vallette. So we had a lot of ladies doing a lot of things, and it was pretty cool. Speaking of Camille Francis, real quick, she qualified in the 300 hurdles, as I said, ran a 45.29 and finished 5th place. Or excuse me, 15th place. Whew. Lastly, I'd like to recognize the ladies who put in the time and work as alternates and kind of run for us and prepare. They get all the ladies ready, and they run just in case, and they are prepared. So real quick, just wanted to shout them out. Kaylin Becken on our distance side, Lexi McGuire, and Eliza Bird on our sprint side. So thanks again to the board for your time recognizing our athletes. I've been on the coaching staff this is my 8th year, my first year as the head coach, and early in the year I said I want to make sure we take a bus to state because I didn't want to drive the van. And we had enough athletes to take the bus, and it was a really cool trip, and I can't imagine, I'm looking forward to doing it all again next year, as Coach Monheim said during the cross-country one. So ladies, congratulations and incredible job.
You can what? You can book in with the shirts. Oh, I like that. So congratulations to those of you that are seniors that are moving on. Best of luck to you in your future, be it in athletics or otherwise. To the juniors, sophomores, and freshmen in this crowd, or at least on the team, look forward to seeing all of you again this time next year after your next state run. And I also like to acknowledge, and there's a few in the audience here too, parents, grandparents, guardians, anyone who may be watching later, you're also a very important part of the success of our athletic program. And the board recognizes and appreciates between, as I like to say, getting them off to practice, encouraging them during the successes, probably encouraging them a little bit more during the downturns and keeping them motivated. It's all very important. So we thank you too for your partnership with these teams in our program. So again, another round of applause for these fine young ladies. I believe that is kind of, not unfortunately, but our only recognition for the night. We did have the baseball team on the agenda, but we'll be doing that at a later date, as I understand. So, okay. I think that concludes on the recognition. Next items on the agenda is probably a 5-minute break, and then public participation, which we have none tonight. So that means we're going to get on to the regular business of the board. You are all welcome to attend, listen to Mr. Drewier's Treasurer's Report. We're going to talk about what is really important levy information tonight. But if you all want to get out in this heat and go for another run in the, 100 or 99-degree heat, now's a good time for you to sneak on out. So we'll take a second while you guys excuse yourself if you want to go. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, girls.
Oh, they have their names on their shirts.
That was great. Great accomplishment on their part. From a guy that can't run from here to there. Okay, next on the agenda, item 6, the superintendent's report, my favorite presentation of the year. Mr. Mavis's annual review and preview of PI and capital projects. Mr. Hostler, any lead-in or just let...
Well, this is something that we started a number of years ago with this presentation, and And we really appreciate the opportunity to share out with the community the projects that are taking place. That this past year, this summer is an incredibly busy time around the district, and also in the future. So, and certainly connected our annual capital project with PI being a big part of that. Mr. Mapus will be here to share a little bit about this. So,
Hello. Hello. Welcome.
So this year, our main focus, kind of when you go through and look at the projects, we looked at all of our, sorry, I feel like I'm really loud. We looked at everything we were doing in the district, all of our contracts, and one of the things that I'm pretty sure my staff was not happy about is I said, let me give you some goals. Let's get rid of some of our contracts. How can we keep this in-house? How can we save money? So we did that. So as we go through this, just keep that in mind, and I'll kind of talk through some of those things. So this year, one of the things that we were doing is we had smaller mowers in the district, and so I wanted to buy a larger mower, especially for the high school, junior high, and things like that. So we ended up purchasing a larger mower. We had $20,000 that was set aside for that, and you can see the cost was pretty close, $19,740. So that was purchased this year. And this is one of my favorite things that we did. So one of the things, and in the next slide, it kind of ties into this, but we were not happy with the company that we were using to fertilize and do weed control in the district. And so we sent 2 of our staff members to the state of Ohio, where they host usually 3 or 4 different places in the year. And this year it was at Kalahari. So we sent 2 of our staff members to get certified so that they could do pesticide. So both of them were trained. We came back, we bought this piece of equipment. We now do all of our own fertilizing and weed control in the entire district, which is a lot. So that has saved us. We no longer have that contract. Those contracts were usually running between $8,000 and $9,000 a year, especially with our athletic fields. So now what we do is Chuck Jaco and myself sit down, we figure out how much fertilizer we're going to need, and we purchase that through athletics, which saves them a ton of money because it's half the cost of what they would have had to pay before. It's actually less than half the cost. So this is my favorite thing that we bought, and this allows us to spray and do our own weeds and things like this. So this tiny mobile robot paints all of our fields in the entire district. It's on a GPS system. You fill it with paint about twice a day, and you just let it do its thing. It will do all of the fields in the district, and at the high school and at the junior high, it'll actually just know when it's done with a job, go to the next job, and just go on. Typically, to line a field, you're anywhere from 6 to 7 hours by the time you pin it, stripe it, and then chalk it, and then go actually to the striping machine to stripe the field. So even though this is a lot of money for the $33,000, it eliminated someone's job to be able to go to do fertilizing and things like that. So you set it up, it works off of GPS. There's a schematic with a handheld, and you pull it over, you just stretch it out, snap the photo, and it's set up. And forever then, it just paints. So it's really cool. I think one of these days we'd like to do operations on our committee, kind of go out and see it or bring something here and paint it in the front, because it is a really neat thing to watch. So music instruments this year, 70,000, like we have been typically doing for instruments. This year they did buy some new instruments. They also fixed some instruments that we were having some problems with. So that's one of the instruments there that was fixed. So Frank, this year, we had a hot water leak. It was actually in the loop, so we had to get that fixed. So it was a necessary thing that we had to do right away. That was the $8,500. Not one of those glamorous things. AC loop, kind of the same thing. We were losing Freon. It wasn't staying cold. $9,679 to fix that. So this year, one of the things that you're going to notice a lot through this presentation is adding new things. The reason it says new or adding new things is because we are growing. So we are making classrooms that have never been classrooms before. We are changing things that were classrooms that were maybe science labs that are now becoming math rooms, or maybe even science rooms, so they're doing dual things. So we've had to get creative with some of our furniture. So one of the things is whiteboards, because obviously some of the science labs didn't have the whiteboards, so we were adding those at Frank and the junior high. Classroom furniture, again, one of those things. Frank, the cost where you see the $6,656.45, that is the kindergarten classrooms. With all-day kindergarten, we've had to add furniture. Carpet at Toth Elementary, we had some classrooms that the tile were not in great shape, and so we decided to put carpet in to kind of clean that up. We also had an area where it was a media center, and when we tore the media center where it was built into the classroom, when we tore that out, the flooring came up with it. So we carpeted that as well, because that will be a classroom next year as well. Again, Toth Elementary, they added, because of all-day kindergarten, $6,877.30. So that's their need as well. Woodland this year, luckily after winter, we lost the blower on the boiler, so that was $12,425. Obviously, it was a necessary repair that we had to do. So last year, we put in the inclusive playground, and then this year, once the playground was in, we were able to put in a sidewalk, so that way any kids that were in a wheelchair or had disabilities were able to get out there and easier, especially in the winter time. So we added that. That was the $9,540. Repaired to the portable roof at Woodland Elementary, the $748. That was just a patch over the back cap. So Woodland Elementary, we renovated again to make classroom space. So that was $15,600. It was a file room, so we had to take the files out of that room, move them to a room that wasn't a file room, convert that room. There were some windows and some things like that. We had to move around, change some of the window locks, things like that, so that we were able to accommodate that. So there were really 2 rooms involved in that $15,600 at Woodland. So Frank and Toth and the junior high, just, again, general furniture that this is more like replacing things that were old in the district. Even though it's new equipment, it's actually replacing furniture that we already had. Part of that is science labs. If you remember back in the day when we were in high school, you had the science lab that had the big, like the concrete tops with the wooden sides. So we had to take those out. So we removed those over spring break, actually, in preparing for this. So all of the science lab, that furniture, Toth had some of the original furniture, Frank had some of the original furniture, and it was just falling apart. So this year, one of the things that we've done is we've done most of our own in-house, like all of our consulting fees and things like that we used to use for outside groups. All of our RFPs, all those things we do now in-house. I write most of those, so we don't use a third-party company to do any of those things. So the money that originally, when you look in the IEP or in the PI fund where it says that money was saved, I took that money and spent it on this. So that's where that money was used. So just if you were wondering where we came up with that, because it wasn't actually in the original assessment. So the junior high, new roof, this year is a tar and chip roof that is coming off, the $530,175. It's a huge project. We should be getting underway with that, hopefully the last week of June going into July, and then should be done the first week of August. So masonry repair, this is kind of the same way. It wasn't one of those original things in the PI, but because of saving money and just changing the way that we internally do things, we were able to save. So this is really a 3-part project. This is one part of that the 3 parts. So we have one more phase and the entire building will be retuck pointed. We were having a lot of problems with moisture entering the building. Actually, on really windy days, you could see where the wind would blow things in the classroom in certain areas and different corners. So we really thought it was crucial to get this fixed. So that cost us $86,699, which was this, just this part. So there's one, like I said, we're on the 3rd of the 4 parts. So the junior high, we added chairs. One of the things that some of the teachers were saying is our chairs are just really bad. Kids are rocking in them, they're breaking, they're bent. So we heard the teacher say, like, we need those. So we actually bought new chairs for a lot of those classrooms. So that's the $14,499, plus also in that $14,499, 3 of those classrooms that were new that were part of the science lab. So we replaced a fire door. We had a fire door that was not operable at the end of last year. It's kind of a big job because they have to go in and cut a hole in the ceiling because they never fit accurately. It was custom. We started the project around Christmas time and then just finished it here at spring break time. The cost of that was $9,985. So whiteboards at the junior high, we had the ones that were going in at Frank, so $4,885, 50 or 66. Some of the classrooms have to have magnetic boards, some of them don't, so the cost varies classroom to classroom. So one of the things, the portable, believe it or not, is into its 4th year here at the district. So with that being said, it settled, and so the doors weren't shutting. We had a couple classrooms that the tile popped and it wasn't level. So right before, I think it was right before Christmas break, we had that all leveled. So $12,000 it cost to bring that in. They actually have to level it, and they had to put new bushings in underneath. A couple of the bushings that the metal support sat on were bad. So they fixed those, and we're level again. So one of the things, listening to parents and Chuck when we were talking, our bleachers were in really bad shape at the baseball, softball. We already had 2 sets that were at both of those. So we had a guy come out, measure so that they would look uniform all together. So there's actually a set on each side of the original, and then we poured concrete pad to be able to do that. So that project in total was $17,924, but definitely much needed. The art room at the high school, we were having moisture problems where moisture was coming up through the floor. We weren't able to clean it, so we actually had the whole floor redone. So that's the $7,400. Parts of it had to be jackhammered out. You can actually see in the picture where some of the paint is, where some of the spots had to be patched. But we haven't had any problems since we did that. And again, high school also needed classroom furniture. They added 118 desks this year, and that is not replacing anything, that is adding. So that is new. So that's $30,000 to $11,44. So bleachers, again, we did the same thing on the other side. This was for that's the baseball side. That was a little bit more in depth just because of the size of it. That cost us $30,260. That was part of the original PI to do the one set, and we thought, well, since we're already here and the people are already out doing it, we might as well do both sides because we know it's going to be a need, and to bring them back out and accrue that extra cost didn't make sense to us, so we did both sides at the same time. So the LED lighting project and HVAC. So this is new equipment that is replacing something. Some of it is new totally to the district. So this is a huge project. It's over the course of several years. It includes general fund, PI funds, TIF funds from this building. It's a lease purchase that we did. I'm sure you guys are familiar with kind of how we did that there years ago. But it's a huge project. It does cost a lot of money. This building, we decided to abandon the boilers. The boilers here, we've struggled with them throughout the course of the year. You're either in a room that's 90 degrees or you're in a room that is 28 degrees in the wintertime. But we have steam leaks everywhere. And so when we sat down with the engineers, I said, I really think this building isn't used as a school anymore. I think it'd be best if we could zone it. And so this was our best option, was to abandon the boilers. All of the pipes in the walls we know are already having problems. Whenever we would fix the boiler and it was strong again, we would have weak spots in the system where we would have a steam leak. We were getting that fixed. So this building, going into next winter, will have no boiler. We'll all have heat where you can schedule it in zones. So that's a big change. The 2 chillers, which actually got set Friday by a crane, over at the high school. They currently do not have air conditioning for the next 3 weeks, though, unfortunately, with the hot weather. It is very hot in that building. But we are getting that set in place. Hopefully that can get hooked up shortly. And then once they're done with the chillers, the boilers will be installed as well on that building. The lighting project part of that has been completed. We were done with that in December. So all of our special ed rooms now have a control where they can control their own lighting. They can do different color lighting. They can control the velocity of the volume of light in the classroom. And then everyone else just got the standard LED, which is on a 3-phase where you can do like a high, low, and medium. So the HR office, we repainted that. It needed to be redone. It's the one place where everyone kind of comes in to see when they first come in, and we had 4 different paint colors in there. So it is all uniform, one paint color now. So that was $6,627 to repaint that. The other thing that we did this year, and the drivers like it, I'm not good at using it, I'll be honest, and I think Courtney was getting aggravated with me the one day when I was trying to drive and use it. It's just because I'm old, and I was like, I don't know how to use this, but it's literally turn-by-turn GPS system. So we have the tablets that go into the system. It tells you all the kids, where they live, every stop. So as soon as you stop the bus and you open the door, it pops up every single person that should be getting off at that stop. Some districts have actually where you scan on and off, and then if the kid scans, it would pop up red and say, no, you don't get off here. We're not to that point, though. We're also really lucky that I would say all of our drivers, and I can confidently say that because I've been with them. I know they know their kids. They know who their students. They know who they are. But it has helped us to be able to track them. The also great thing about the GPS, and where I actually like it when I drive, is the turn by turn. It literally tells you everywhere to go. So one of the reasons that we went to this is I was at a conference, and I asked the question to a state highway patrolman. I said, so with this new law changing, going to hands-free, you can't have anything in your hands. If a driver has a distracted driver has the route sheet in their hand and they're in an accident, is that driver going to be charged with just being in an accident or distracted driving? Because that could make a difference. And he said, I honestly can't answer that. It's case by case. And so Courtney and I started talking, and this is something we've been wanting with the elementary students anyways, and I said, I think now's the time. We just have to make it happen. So it's been great, and one of the things that you have to think about is we have, on a daily basis, when you figure all of our routes, some of our buses do 3 tiers. So when you start adding those up, we have over 160 routes that are different. So even if I'm driving bus 1 for the day, I have 3 routes in the morning and 3 routes in the afternoon that are all a little bit different. So being able to have that GPS has really helped us, and I honestly think that's one of the reasons that we currently have 18 subs. So I think that's something we have over other districts, is that turn by turn. So one of the things too is we're in our last year of the 12 buses that we purchased on the last EPA grant, which was a little bit different than this EPA grant that we just recently got. But the cost of that we take out of the PI was the $189. It's obviously more than that, but general fund picks some of up, and that's just the part that the PI picks up. So I kind of already explained the tablet. So the GPS part actually shows like where the bus is, where the bus driver drops, and then this is actually for the tablet piece, which was the $48,381.57. But they tie together; they work together as one unit. The other thing was the stadium, returfing the field. So $468,850 for that project, and that was split between general and PI. Actually, I think it didn't work out half and half, and Randy picked up the larger amount of that, but that was done as well. Any questions?
Any questions? How, as we look forward into next year, you'd mentioned coming off the lease of those buses. How is the busing situation, the vehicle situation for next year looking?
Yeah, so we currently have the vehicles to introduce. I think we have the driver, so to deal with the growth. We do have some buses that are still in the 1990s, but we currently, just with a couple weeks ago, we just got notice that we qualify for $400,000 through an EPA grant. So we will be able to purchase hopefully 16 new buses. While with this payment dropping off, we should be able to pick up those 16. It'd be a little bit more. I think Randy and I feel comfortable with moving forward with that. So we'll be able to add 16 more propane buses to the fleet. So typically with the propane buses, we don't get as great of gas mileage. We get a mile less, but we're also only paying 98 cents for our gas. Some of the local schools just renegotiated that, rebid it, and they were for 94 cents. It went down actually. So I'm hopeful that when ours falls, our agreement for propane drops off this year, that we're also able to get that 94 cent. So 94 cents versus the 348 plus diesel engines, you have DEF fluid that you have to use. You have, there's more oil changes frequently, where the propane you don't because it's a cleaner gas. But we're doing well. Courtney's done a really great job of bringing in drivers. On that Drive the Bus event that we had, where we brought people out, it was great. We had over 33 people come out and drive buses, and 14 of them currently are going to be driving for us next year. So we're really excited about that.
That's great.
And I think on the 16 potential buses with the EPA grant, we can do that and not see additional costs. What we're spending today on the lease, it'll be a new lease purchase, but we're not gonna see an increase in what we're spending, and actually, so we'll save money, and probably they cost a little bit more up front, but you're looking at $8,000 or $9,000 a year in savings per year, bus per bus. So you easily, if you think about 16 buses, you make up quite a bit, quite quickly.
Yeah.
Sure. And you'd actually mentioned something that had sparked another question in my mind. Sorry, don't mean to put you on the spot on this one too. So I'd received some, let's call it feedback from someone that I don't know how much work, or that I don't know what all the federal and, let's just say in general, grants are out there for capital improvement type stuff. And I'd probably tend to agree that I don't. It's not my role to know that, but it's probably more, your role, the administration's role. Could you walk us through kind of the efforts you and your team go through to find grants for these type of purchases?
Yeah. So there's several different ways that we go through grant processes. Usually, most of the time, what happens is the state will send you out a list of, here's different grants that we have. The Ohio School Council is great about notifying you. Some of them we just find on our own, or just word of mouth by having different organizations where we get together, like MVOM or Capital Conference, where people just talk and network. But typically what happens is those go out, we apply for them. This last one with the school bus grant was really challenging to try to get. There were several step processes. It took Courtney, myself, and Kelly Wells to get through it. It was a huge process, but as a team, we were able to get through it. We made our way through it, and were able to get that $400,000. But it just depends. There's so many different ones. This year we got water, drinking fountains, which Brooke actually went to a meeting. She's like, hey, you can get drinking fountains. So we applied for that. So just all of us networking together and finding things out and applying for things is really helpful. And we apply for everything we can. Sometimes it's discouraging. Sometimes we'll spend hours, days putting something together, and then we get a letter back that says thanks, but due to no poverty in your district, or where your poverty level is, like you don't qualify, and they break it out. We've had several of those. There's been a lot of state and federal ones that came out for safety, and we applied for them, and we were unfortunately denied 4 times on that. But we apply, because if you don't apply, you never know. So I would say on average, we probably do 14, 15 in a year.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Is that it? No more questions?
And I would say, it's clear that you identified a few projects that you were able to do because you and other staff are now doing those in-house. So that you're not, that there's a savings there that then is benefiting. So thank you for doing those.
Yeah.
And thank you to the other staff in the district that making the furniture possible and the tuck pointing and the masonry work you noted. So
thank you.
Commendable.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mapes. Okay, that takes us into Mr. Dreyer. You are up, sir, for the treasurer's report.
All right, I will be very brief tonight. The presentation you have attached to the agenda was what was presented in finance. I'm going to abbreviate this today. The section at the end on special education, we'll save that for another day. We got other things we need to discuss tonight, so I'll just spend a few minutes updating where we are through May on our financials, if that's acceptable to the board. If you really want to hear about special education, I'm fine to do that, but I think it's good stuff. But it certainly can wait.
It is a good presentation, and we should hear it on another day. So, yeah, finance sat through it, and we were riveted.
Okay, yeah, thank you. You're very kind. All right, so through May, so almost 92% of the year, we're sitting 136 true cash days. It'd be nice to be there all year, but that's not the way it works. Year to year, we're up 5.7% on our revenue and 4.6% on our expenses. So nothing really trending there that's surprising. But let me hit on a couple of points. First thing I want to talk about, in the green box is restricted state aid. You'll see we're tracking well, much over last year, and a lot of that has to do with the changes in the funding formula and restricted funds. Restricted funds are like student wellness and special education stuff. The big one in there that we hadn't received yet, but we received it last Wednesday, is our threshold cost payment. And that's in my special education presentation, but let me just make it very simple. In our special education funding, the state holds back 10%, puts it in a pot of money, and then divides it among the school districts this time of year. And it's always a year in arrears. So we're getting money from, not this year, but from last year. And this year's payout was 36%, so, which is highest I've ever seen it. We had about $700,000 in threshold cost. That means at $700,000 in cost above a threshold of about $32,000 per student. So when a student has more than $32,000 in costs, above that we can apply for threshold costs. And we got about $250,000. State held back $112,000, we got $250,000 back. So that system is working for us as well as it works. It's still obviously not all the money we spend, but so we'll actually end up unrestricted state aid ahead of forecast because of that. I tend to be a little pessimistic on what the payout is on threshold costs. But there are a number of districts who don't even apply for it because they think it's not worth the effort. And I'll say it's worth the effort here, obviously. And if Angie Stafford in Pupil Services and Angie Adams in my office work together to get that done. And between those two, obviously, they're generating reimbursements for us that it's worth its weight in gold. Another big revenue item, we're behind on this one, is state share of local property taxes. And I've talked about this before. It used to be called a tax allocation. It's where on your property tax you see home occupancy discount, non-business discounts, and that was enacted when the state enacted the income tax. Said, hey, homeowners, we'll give you a break. We'll give you discounts on your property tax, and the state will keep the districts whole, and that's what that is. So normally we get this end of April. We finally got it last week, and again, we'll end up, we're behind here, but we'll end up meeting forecast on that. So it was nice to see that $2 million deposit into our account. And that's purely a function of, again, it went up because valuations went up and discounts went up. Now, state takes credit for that as providing local funding for students, which is kind of backhanded a little bit, but it is what it is. So there's our you see this monthly, our cash balance. We're setting where we expected at this point, and this is important. You know, you can see the trend over the years, the incremental levy, what it's done for us up to this point. And you know, the green line, we were in trouble, difficulties, I say at that time. But so just again, revenue, we're in great shape. We got our threshold costs last week, and our state share of local revenue. And it's been a good year, cost control. I mean, our supplies are going to come in under budget. Purchase services are going to come in under budget. And I'd like to take huge credit for that, but a lot of that is on purchase services typically is driven by special education and the demands of our kiddos. And we've probably had a little bit less demand than we've had in previous years, but that could change year to year. And that one's a hard one to forecast. Once you go through every kiddo and see what they're going to need each year. So I'll leave it at that. So looking good. We thought we'd come in ahead of November forecast, around $6 million favorable, and we're still on that track. And if you look in the report, by the way, in the cash, there's a kind of a cash flow. It'll say you'll be unfavorable in revenue by 2.2 million. That's because the rollback hadn't come in yet, the state share. Once that came in, we're level again.
And that's come in, that came in.
That came in on June 12th.
Yep.
Yeah. I can remember that my sister's birthday. It reminded me to wish her a happy birthday. So.
Any questions on the May financials from anyone? And then there's a couple other items here, usual items for this time of year, but you care to walk us through 7.3 and 7.4?
Yeah, so 7.3 is the final permanent appropriations. And it's just that you're approving what we can spend. And in order to start spending money on July 1st, we need to have some temporary appropriations. And that is probably about 90% toward final. There's a few funds that we haven't budgeted yet, just because like grants and stuff like that, we'll wait till the end of the month to do them, because there's no, I could get them right in a day or two and get you another temporary appropriation. We have to have a permanent appropriation by the end of September, which is a crazy name because you could modify it every month or as often as you want with board approval. But no matter how, as explained to the buildings, you can't, no matter how much money you have in the bank, you can't spend it unless the board's appropriated it for you to spend it. So that's what you're doing. And then item 7.5, that just gives me a broad authorization. If I run across something I need to do, like move some funds, which I don't anticipate, I can do, allow me to do that, and I'll let you know if I have to do that, then you kind of give me retro approval on it. Talking to our auditors about it, it's not, I can't say it's loved by the auditors, but they understand why we do it. But as long as, if I had to do something, I send you an email, say, hey, I need to transfer $10,000 for this reason, so that you're aware of it. But so far they have allowed that. What it does is, a lot of districts have their June board meeting the 28th, 29th, or 30th of June. That way you don't have to worry about this because we're done spending. We're going relatively early, so I need to have, unless I want to call a special board meeting for you to do appropriations. And Dr. Reffert doesn't think that's a good idea. So,
You could see the need for a special board meeting depending on how an item later on in the agenda goes, and I don't think it'll be for this item.
So that's what those are. So they're normal business.
Yep. All right, very good. Thank you, thank you very much, Mr. Drury. So next on the agenda, then I'm looking for motion to approve agenda items 7.2 to 7.5.
So moved.
Ms. Roland Miller?
A second, aren't we approving 7.1 as well? Or that doesn't need approval?
7.1 is just his
7.1 is
presentation.
just my
Just
presentation.
your
We never,
presentation. Okay,
we
sorry.
don't do 7.1.
So, yeah, 7.2 sounds fine.
Thank you, Ms. Larimer. So with that, roll call, please.
Ms. Roland Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes?
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, finance items are approved. Next on the agenda are the board committee reports. And we will start with, I guess, Ms. Larimer. We'll come to you in a second.
Yeah.
And we'll
come
go
me in a
to-
second, yep.
We'll go to teaching and learning.
Our agenda and the presentation provided at our meeting is there for your review. Just to highlight, we spent a lot of time talking about the one plan and the different aspects of the one plan. And I'm happy to report that the update is that it has been approved by the state, so that with no revisions. So congratulations to Mr. Swartzmiller on that one. And so those main goals around math and ELA, and then focusing on reaching the needs of the at-risk population will be three of the main goals going forward for our district. Could say more about that, but I'll keep moving. We also talked about just the continued rollout of the training and implementation of Wit and Wisdom, and that is going really well. And there's still a lot of the staff that needs to do the training, but a good chunk of them have already done it, and it's planned out how that'll be accomplished. I think that's the highlights. You can see some of the other pieces in the presentation that would be good to review.
Okay, Ms. Larimer. I will give you your choice.
Oh, okay.
Operations or communications?
All right. Well, communications is pretty quick. That we have been talking about marketing ideas and the way that we can satisfy the needs of what the strategic planning committee came up with in communicating and reaching out to our community better. It doesn't sound like that should be a difficult discussion, but we're finding that with all the information that we have given out and it not landing, we want to do a better job of making sure that it lands. So RFPs have been sent out to marketing advisors, and we're getting ready to work on that. Heather will be coming in probably August. Okay, I get a nod. To talk to us about all the work, the amazing work that she did on that focus group that you guys got information on a few sessions ago. So she will be here in August due to her own travel schedule that she can discuss that with us. Did you want to add anything else, Susan?
Yeah, I think the one is that I would highlight the auditors in the minutes from the meeting, the link to the auditors' kind of recommendations, guidance on board engagement and the district's engagement in campaigning for levies. And I would encourage you to look at the board pieces of that in your leisure. The other piece is the last part, that community engagement piece. You all received the email inviting you to join Mr. Hostler on Thursday to kind of meet with, be open to whoever wants to stop by. We'd like to kind of expand that to possibly looking at the next couple months and what other ideas people have, but this is a third Thursday, and so we're wondering if we want to expand that to do the third Thursday where we meet. You know, we're available here at the Commodore lawn before the concerts begin. So I don't know if we want to just do that for an hour or two, that we would be available here for anyone who wants to stop and talk and share or ask questions, either from like 6 to 7 or 5:30 to 7, whatever we want to do. That if we did that for the third Thursdays, that would be a good start. There may be other ways to expand that, but didn't know how that sounded to everybody. We wanted to kind of kick that out. We had said last month we wanted to be able to talk about that in the future, so this is
Ice
a
cream
proposal.
in hand, right? I had an idea, and it's gone. Sorry, I don't know where it went.
Well, I think, that suggestion as you laid out, that is, obviously a good suggestion, and I'm interested, I like experiments anyway, and get a couple of board members to show up and see who shows up and have the conversations and make the offer is a good thing. So I'd be in favor of that. Again, that invitation for Mr. Hostler's listening session, his next one, June, this week, Thursday? Thursday, we did, Miss Larimer has offered to be at the table. I believe Ms. Menke, you as well are tentative, but trying to make it. And I don't think, from my viewpoint, that stops another board member from being in the background attending. And, please don't make any decisions while you're there on our behalf. That's probably the one guardrail we will put up
You're all
around
allowed
this.
to be in the same place.
We're all allowed to be in the same place.
It's what
that's
you do in
right.
that same place.
That's right. So,
The only decision we'll make is what kind of burrito to get.
but we do
Don't
have
vote.
We do have two volunteers or a volunteer and a strong tentative to represent the board in some of that as we support the communications committee's efforts to enhance the communications
And so just
with
to-
the community.
Yeah, and to clarify that one is at El Voclero.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then in July and August, if we do the third Thursday, we would do it here at the Commodore.
Are
And
we
we'll
out on the
figure out.
lawn, or where
Yeah.
were you thinking of doing that?
Yeah, I would
Out
do
on-
it out. We'll figure out logistics. I don't know if anyone has a tent, but we could just set up out before the concert and then kind of pack up before the concert.
Okay.
With a different idea to come in after the concert, so we're not sitting out there in February, March.
Yes, no, yeah. I think the original idea was maybe to just try it in July and August, see how it goes, and then we can decide, if we want to continue that into the fall or not.
And maybe you won't need air conditioning by then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Plant a tree.
Yeah. We get there early enough. For operations, it was a quick meeting, but as James always does, he provided a lot of the information that you need right there. So I would just say refer to the notes, and his presentation knocked it out of the park. That's pretty much what we did for the entire year. And Susan, thank you for pointing out how excellent they are at saving a dime and nickels and thousands of dollars over and over and over again to be able to afford extra projects. If anybody can stretch $1.5 million, it's going to be James and his team. So kudos to them, because I don't know how they do it.
Well, and I think it's a point when the board's vision to add that director of operations, you couldn't do it without having that position, because Jason and Courtney and Denise are wrapped up in the day-to-day stuff, and James can do these other things, so.
And you do it so well. You really do. Don't ever let anybody tell you differently. Let's see, what else am I doing? Oh, I was able to, let's see, no, wait a minute. I took notes because I was down in Mississippi, but I was able to go to the PSF meeting on June 11th. They are thinking of, and again, here's another person who thinks out of the box all the time, and he just blows my mind at doing this, and that's Jeff Abke. He's thinking of working with the library in creating some presentations on how people can, as they're looking towards what to do with maybe donating to this, that, or the other thing, and hopefully that would include Perrysburg. How do you actually go about doing that? What does this really look like? What do you need to be planning for now in your 40s or 50s for something that you may want to do in your 60s and beyond? And so they're thinking of putting something together at the library for a presentation, especially with Janelle on the board right now. It's a team made in heaven, so they're working on that. One thing that I thought was really quite significant was, oh, those are my notes, and he sent me a better text on it. Let me see if I can find that fast for you. Okay, Jeffy, where are you? Of course, I'm not going to be able to find it right away. Doggone it. They've done over 99 projects, they being the Perrysburg School Foundation for the Arts Council. They have done over 99 projects with them for over $300,000. Now, in his text to me, maybe he sent me an email. Just the amount of money and the value that they are affording our fine arts to be able to do $300,000, over $300,000. This is through donations and the Cranker Fund, and there was another one. There was another one besides the Cranker Fund.
I think ProMedica has part of that too, yeah.
Okay, so I just think that was so super cool. My note says, see Jeff's email of 6/13/24, so he did send me an email. And in the buzz, it said that we had a meeting in July. Cross that off, because we do not have a meeting in July. So our next meeting is not going to be August 13th either. It's being moved to the 20th, because the 13th is the first day of school. So we moved that. So the foundation is just going great gangbusters right now and doing a lot of amazing things for these students in this district and our teachers, because it's not just for the students, it's also for teachers as well. I'm closing my book.
I didn't know if that was a signal. Thank you very much, Ms. Larimer. You win the prize for most committee involvement this month, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, no policy committee, but we do have the second reading of some policy items from the last policy committee in the consent agenda. Speaking of which, next item, I'm sorry, any other committee things to talk about? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is covering items 10 through 14.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Roland Miller.
Second.
Dr. Ruffert? Roll call, please.
Ms. Roland Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Ruffert,
Yes.
Ms. Minke,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, the consent agenda passes. So next on the agenda is going to be our a board discussion. We've done something a little bit different with the agenda this time. I kind of like the suggestion here. We've moved the superintendent's treasurer's presentation of the options for a levy to this section so that then we can also get a little closer to the vote for it. I'm going to offer the opportunity before we get into that discussion to take a 5-minute break. I'm seeing one head, two heads nodding, so
please.
we will be on break for 5 minutes. We'll come back and start board item number 15.1. We are back in session. We're back in session. So next on the agenda, Mr. Hosser, Mr. Drewer, the third superintendent's and treasurer's presentation in as many meetings. So
Right,
you have the
thank
floor.
you, thank you. So, so what we're hoping to accomplish today is to provide some further levy scenarios and then the implications with each of those scenarios. Based on feedback from the last board meeting, the second of a series of 3 that we've had to date, about what to do with the expiring levy. So a little bit of background with that. In 2019, the school district asked voters to approve a 5-year incremental levy, which they did, so we're very grateful for that. It is set to expire on December 31st of 2024. It represents 17% of our total operating budget. So it is a $13 million, $13.5 million piece of the district's puzzle. So through the series of meetings the Board of Education has had and discussions, it was clear that the board did not want to walk away and let this expire. So that led us down the next path. How does this incremental levy work? So it's a little different than traditional levies. So we've had an incremental levy in 2008, 2012, and 2019. So as a school district, we have used this repeatedly. And this slide, I think, really does capture the benefits. So so it passed in 2019. So the first year of that 5-year incremental levy was in 2020. On the ballot language, because they have to use the current valuation of the community to assess how many mills it may collect, and that is there in the second column. But in a growing school district where the values of the district are increasing, more homes, more businesses, the value of those are increasing, you see the amount that is needed to collect, or the millage that is needed to collect that amount is far below what was projected. So in that first year, just doing a side-by-side to collect $7.5 million, the ballot language said 7.9 mils, but what was really needed, just again, a year later, was 7.8 mils. But the next year, increment goes up $1.5 million. The ballot language said we'll need 9.5 mils to collect that, but actually we needed 8.35 mils. And you can see as the dollar amount increases, the actual effective millage rate there is significantly less. And so where the last year to generate $13.5 million, it was 9.75 mils. Which as we start to explain this, so incremental levy, you set the dollar amount and how you want it to increase each year. And then we talked about the accumulation is based on the current school district, what it costs today, but we know that each year that will change as the values in the community continues to grow. In 2019, it was projected to begin at 7.9 mils, and that was shown in the last slide, and it ended at 14.2 mils is what it was projected. And so over the life of that, when we were talking about this in 2019, the ballot language showed it would grow by 6.3 mils. But now looking back at what it actually did, it grew just under 2 mils, 1.95 mils during that time, from the beginning to the end. So there, to keep, it's $220 a month versus $220 a year versus $68 a year per $100,000 assessed valuation. So that's why this incremental levy is really a very beneficial option for the district, because it keeps pace with growth, but also for the taxpayers, because we only take what we need, and when we do, we see the benefit of growth in the community going for this. So what would happen if the board were to walk away? And we've shown this before in previous slides. Walking away from this would be the same as the voters choosing not to renew or replace this. And you can see that it would lead to each year you can see more and more red. This is from Mr. Dreer's 5-year forecast. And we're looking at 130 employees by the time that it would take full effect to give people an idea of what that could mean. Also, I think it's important to note that on December 31st, 2024, 1.85 mills is retiring. Debt mills are retiring. And I think that's important as we talk about the future. One thing that did come up and talk a little bit about elections, because, why did we have a 5-year incremental levy in 2019? And the reason being is we wanted to have it line up with the presidential election, because that gives the maximum number of voters a chance to weigh in on important questions like this. But a few other kind of factoids. So in Ohio, 22% of the registered voters turned out on March 19th. So it's and Perrysburg numbers reflected this. We understand that, the lining up with the presidential elections gives more people an opportunity to weigh in on that. And so March 24th was really an outlier. And when you look at the kind of the history here of school ballots, so this is additional tax levies. So this is not a renewal, but additional. In 2012, 36% passage rate. So what was happening in 2012? We were coming out of the recession. And so that was certainly a challenging time. November 2016, 60% passage. November 20th, 31%, COVID. And March 2024, we had 36 issues, 16% pass. So you can see that new issues, you've seen the whole fluctuation there. With renewals, in 2012, 88% passed. November, 97% passed. November 2020, 86% passed. And then March, 68% passed, which again, March was the lowest for all elections. Coming back, a little closer look here. This is interesting. Since 2020, 27% of the active voters in Perrysburg registered. So 1/4 of the active voters in Perrysburg have registered in the last 4 years. So, changing community. 15% of parents and guardians are not registered to vote. And you can get this information through, public ways. And so there's sometimes people say, well, if you just got every parent to vote for it, it would pass, and that's false. There's, over 20,000 registered voters, and there aren't that many. There's not 10,000 registered parents, and of those, 15% aren't registered of our parents. So that's an area that certainly we need to educate. And then the voter turnout, August 2023, which was the election that was hastily called by the legislature after they eliminated the August elections. Only 3% of our parents turned out for that. November 2023, 43%, and March 28%, which again goes back to that earlier slide about all of Ohio, 22% showing up. 92% of employees who live in the district are registered to vote. So that's not a bad stat, but we'd like it to be 100%. And 17% of registered employees didn't vote in March of 2024. So the just highlighted here, so I mentioned the incremental levy 08, 12, and 19. In 2016, we had an incremental levy set on a presidential cycle that was set to expire. And the Board of Education in 2016 asked the voters to renew it. And they did so, and the term of that levy ask was that it be continuing. And so we were very fortunate, the voters approved it. Over 66% of the voters said yes in 2016. So the last time the board, had a situation with an incremental levy that was to expire and they asked it to be renewed, it was passed by 66% and it was continuing. So that's something that we don't have to bring back before the voters. Here's the actual total votes. So going back to the presidential primary in 2024, only 8,000 people voted. And then you can look at the 2022, which is the gubernatorial, which is typically the second highest November election. Next to the presidential, it had 14,000 voters. And then the presidential in 2020 had almost 19,000. And then you can see the percentages, how they break down in terms of being for it. So going, from 2008 up until, 2023, those were all successful, and you can see the margins of those and how they vary. And this, I think, is important too, that as we talk about schools, we talk about the community, the general public, the National Board of Realtors. A direct correlation exists between excellent schools and property values. This applies to every homeowner, no matter what their age or if they have children at school. So these discussions go well beyond the parents and families that we serve, but it's the entire community. So what we heard from the last discussion that the board had about this, we heard, number one, securing funds for securing these funds is critical. So I think there was total agreement with, we do not want to let these funds go. We want to capture these funds. We need to secure them, because I think we recognize that 17% going away changes the complexion of our school district significantly. The levy cycle voter fatigue is real, and we showed that in previous presentations. Just having levies pop back up to secure the funding that you have. Reducing the number of asks was also tied into that, which we heard that. The levy cycle to keep existing funding every 4 to 5 years for operational or PI makes long-term planning challenging, because when do you go back to the voters if you're sandwiched in between levies that are expiring and you're having to renew them just to keep the money that you have coming into the district. We heard the concern about the ability to meet students' needs in our growth, and that continues to be a concern. And we also heard that limiting school district spending moving forward was important as well. So on that note, we heard the last time that we wanted to investigate renewing the levy and asking for no additional funds for 4 years and beyond, and what would that look like. So what we began to look at is, exploring what that option would be. And it's pretty complicated to think about how would you go about eliminating, or eliminating, reducing, and doing that work. And I know at the work session, you talked about, well, we would need to communicate with all the department heads, because we have a process that we follow when we have faced those questions or reductions. And so it was expressed in that meeting, we're not interested in going that far into it, but we'd like a sense of what that would look like. And so what we did is we went back to 2019, and we'll kind of walk through, because we went through a more in-depth process where we did all those things. And I think it gives us a glimpse at what it could be. But for this particular renewing expiring levy with no additional funds, so it's a 4-year renewal of the 2019 incremental levy with no increase. So it does secure that funding for 4 years. So that's one of the things that we agree that that's an important thing. There's no new funds to match student growth, and that means no new teachers, staff members, buses, desks, or supplies. We just heard a presentation from Mr. Mapus about the number of desks and supplies and buses and things of that nature. So with coming off an incremental levy where it becomes a fixed sum levy, where we're collecting a fixed dollar amount moving forward, it's not changing. Then we know that there aren't those funds available when there was an incremental levy where it was keeping pace with that. And of course, the outcome of that would be significant changes to class size, course offerings, and services that we provide students. So to look at this, and Randy and I and the team spent some time looking at how this would line up. And there's a couple of different phases we wanted to talk about. So one is the assumption that the levy renewal would pass. So we would secure that 17%. But moving forward, and not wanting to go to the voters for additional funds, that means that we would need to begin to implement cuts within year 25 and 26, and that would be $3 million worth of reductions, approximately 4%. So with these cuts in place, we'd be able to operate until 28, 29. And then we would run out of funds in 29. So with that, we would begin to implement phase 2, which would be an additional $5 million of reductions in addition to the $3 million that we had, and to keep us going, as we would exit that levy cycle. So here's kind of the layout of that. So in 2024, the operational levy, a 4-year operational levy, would be renewed. The next year, we would have the permanent improvement levy that'd be set to expire. And then we'd be implementing next year also phase 1 of those reductions. And then those would, take effect. And then keeping that kind of directive, which was, not going to the voters, we know that levy would pop back up in 2028. And if it was, a renewal, keeping the same dollar amount, we know moving forward we'd have to make some additional cuts. And then essentially, as we get to those later years, we would have to make cuts, for cost of living and things, because we would have no additional money. It would be, this is what we have, and if we wanted to add teachers, we have to cut somewhere else. And we're estimating a 3 to 5% reduction for those. So we'd have 5 levies in 10 years, all to essentially, collect the same amount of money, not a dollar more. 5 levies in 10 years. So that's kind of a breakdown of that. So, Randy, this is kind of a chart that maybe you want to touch on that you'll see this with these analysis.
Yeah, so I mean, the point really is that as you look out, obviously we have a cash balance that gets us through for a few years, and if you maintain that level of revenue, and then you're going to have to do reductions that essentially just keep up with inflation, right? So if inflation is 5%, you're going to have to do reductions at least 5% to keep up with that, and so that's why I have the 3 to 5% reduction, because it's at this point all we're trying to do is treading water, right? So if our growth continues, student growth continues, obviously the revenue is not, it's I don't know how you maintain it.
So the next slide that we'll show is not what we're projecting for the future. The next slide that we show is actually a look backward to 2019. And so in 2019, we had an incremental levy that we asked the voters to approve, and they did, and it's expiring at the end of this year. But while we prepared for that, if that levy were not approved, we would need to make mid-year reductions, and we would need to make mid-year reductions in 2019, and we needed to cut $2.7 million. Now with this, we had to overshoot $2.7 million because being a mid-year reduction, we had spent some of those dollars. There were certain contracts that we couldn't cut mid-year. We had to wait to the next year. So this is what we shared with the community in 2019 and the Board of Education, outlining what we would have to do as part of a detailed plan. So this was the phase 1 of what if the levy fails in 2019. And so we're going to share, these are the things that the board looked at, the team here in the district reviewed, presented to the community. The board said, yes, this is the plan, and so we'll break it down by area. So the first slide is the high school. The thing about the high school, there are more opportunities to make reductions than other buildings. In in elementary school, it's really challenging to cut. If you set a target of 4% or 3% or 2.7%, it's hard to find that in an elementary school because they don't have extracurriculars. They don't have the extra things that are there. You can't cut 3rd grade to get to 2.7% reduction. So you'll see, the high school, a mixture of programs. And when we say programs are led by staff. So when you cut programs, it affects staff, the staff that teaches those programs. So at the high school, you can see the number of actual staff that would be cut, and then you get into the positions that represent programs that we would cut with athletics and extracurriculars. And you can see how that works. And then going to the junior high, not quite as many as the high school, but again, the junior high has lots of activities that you start paring those things down. And again, the first few there are staff members, and then you can look at some of the different programs that are there. As you get to HPI, the elementary and preschool, they all fit on one slide here. And you can see, again, positions, intervention specialists, reading intervention, things that aren't required, but things that we have that make a difference in the lives of our students and the families that we serve. And then we get into central office, district-wide support positions and district positions, and you can see where those fall. So it gets into technology, operations, and then transportation, really changing how we transport students, not only our students, but also St. Rose students. Right now they have their own flight, and back in 2019, we said if the levy fails, we have to consolidate our routes with their routes in addition to eliminating, extracurricular transportation and also centralized, busing for high school. Centralized pickup for high school students, which would require them to board at an elementary school, and then from there that would run a shuttle, basically. So no door to door. So you can see there how that works. So to get to that amount, again, this was an exercise that we did in 2019 where we actually looked at positions and names and dollars amount. We did overshoot that because we know with the bumping and RIF, the kinds of things that have to happen, we needed to hit that target of $2.7 million. But this gives you an idea of what that looks like. And I know for those that were on the board at that time, it was a very heavy heart. And then we moved into the next year because these were only the mid-year reductions. But you can begin to see what that would look like. And a levy failure would obviously, this is kind of the blueprint, the process that we followed. There's some positions and things have changed since 2019, but you understand where we would begin to look. And again, the debt mills are 1.85 mills are set to expire at the end of this year. So that's great news in terms of talking about doing something here. And you'll see this slide again, because I think it's really important. Like, well, why are we talking about asking voters for additional funds? And the reason being is we heard the presentation just moments ago about the number of desks and the number of things that we have to do and buses. As a district that continues to grow, we have to continue to find a way to match that growth with staff and programming. And so you've seen this chart that shows year after year over year what that growth is, and it's happening at every level. So it's not like we just have one big class. It's happening in every building. So that is renewing the levy, and we called that option A, and it's renewing the operational levy at 4 years. But then we wanted to, and it was kind of talked about, but it wasn't explicit. So we wanted to kind of maybe do bookends. And the other bookend of this is, what about renewing the levy like we did in 2016? So as a community, we're not really plowing new turf here, but as a continuing levy, knowing that at some point in time the board would have to consider asking the voters for a small, an ask of new money down the road. So using that expiring levy, it would be a renewal, so it would collect the same dollar amount, just like the previous example. That renewal would not provide, just like the last one, new funds to match student growth. And we would know that we would need additional funds by 2017, estimated between 1.25 and 1.75 mils new. So that's something we'd have to begin to consider. So with that option, you have the operational levy renewal, you have the permanent improvement levy, and then in 2027, you would have that levy. How that board would structure it would be up to them, but we know that's about the range of millage we would need. And then that kind of opens up the next several years for other considerations. So it does lock in secure, just like the first option, though that millage, except it doesn't have it come back up in 4 years. So here we have 4 levies in 10 years, and 3 of the 4 are just to capture funds that we're already collecting. So it would be 1 new additional levy and of asking for new money in 10 years. So consider these our bookends that just as examples, and anything or any variation of that in between could be there. Option B, so this is replacing the levy with a 6-year incremental levy that would continue to do what this current incremental levy does, which is increase by $1.5 million a year. So the replacement levy would collect $1.5 million a year, which is what we've been doing since 2019. So it's replicating that levy, and it would continue to match, student growth that we have. We would be able to maintain a positive cash balance to the 29-30 school year. And this is always a challenge because Randy and I go back and forth. I live in the school year calendar, which is 29 to 30. He lives in the fiscal calendar, which is 1 year. So we have to be really careful that we're matching up. So we'd have a positive cash balance going into the school year 29-30. And that aligns with the presidential elections, the gubernatorial in terms of the number of voters. So 6 years would drop us into that cycle where it's not the presidential in 6 years, but it would be the gubernatorial, which is the second most, voted election that's offered. So this is how it would be structured here, this slide. So we have an incremental levy of 6 years, so $1.5 million a year increase, which is 1.1 mil. And so for a $100,000 home value, and people can kind of do the math themselves depending on their home valuation, it would be $3.15 per month. And the way the incremental levy works, as we've talked about before, is this is using the valuations from today, and as we've demonstrated, that changes. But it would be year 2025, it would be 1.1 mil added, and then you can see the plus sign there represents that would be an additional 1.1 mil the next year, and as well as the $3.15 a month, the plus sign there, it would increase that next year as well. So it builds. The calendar of how that would look, you can see there in orange, it would be replaced in 2024, and then in 2030, it would be brought back up. The challenge with this is, again, as we talked about, heading into 2029, the district would need to go to voters and ask for either 1.25 or 1.75 mils, or if that weren't an option, then we'd have to begin to make those reductions that we had talked about in the, setting that up, with that first option A. So we would have a situation where there's an operational levy in 2024, permanent improvement 2025, 2029, the board would consider possibly asking voters for additional funding. And then we have in 2030, permanent improvement levy that's expiring, and then we'd have this levy that would be expiring as well. So you would see, 5 levies between 2024 and 2030. And 4 of those 5 are just to keep the same level of funding that the district is receiving. So again, incremental levies work. We talked about how this 1.1 mil would be added, each year. And I think it's important to kind of show how this 5-year incremental levy worked here for us. And again, it is an increase of 1.95 mils over 5 years because of growth in the community. So forecasting out of what it would be and how it would behave if it follows this format, which it has, which is why the district has used this since 2008. It's challenging to project exactly what that exact millage will be, but in our case, that's a good thing because it's far below what what would be projected based on no changing valuation. So this is that end of year cash balance. And I know Randy can kind of, highlight the blue there.
Yeah, so we haven't got to the 8-year, but there's, unfortunately, I just noticed the two blues are kind of close. The darker blue is the 6-year, right? So it gets us out, 2030, potentially 2031 with smaller reductions, that kind of thing. So it gives us some flexibility a few years out. It's, probably the main advantage of it at this point. So you think about being on the ballot in November of 29. That's because the fiscal year and the assessment year are off, right? The assessment year is January, the fiscal year is July. So just always got to think about you're on the ballot in November for the next calendar year. So like you'd be on the ballot and we'd be on the ballot in 29 to cover anything 30 and beyond.
So this slide you've seen about the debt mills, 1.85 mils going away. So again, we're talking about adding 1.1 mil and to kick things off at the same time, 1.85 mils are retiring. And the reason we're doing this is we're a growing district. So option C, and this is replacing this current levy with a incremental levy for 6 years, but instead of using 1.5 million to use $2 million per year. So that's an increase of 500,000 over what we're doing now. So just kind of, it better keeps with growth, and we'll see what the results of that are. It's patterned after this 2019 incremental levy, except it's it's $500,000 more. And we'll maintain a positive cash balance through 2030, 2031. And again, it aligns with the gubernatorial election, which is, the second highest turnout for voters, which is important in giving the maximum number of residents an opportunity to vote. So how that would work, it is to raise $2 million. It's 1.44 mils based on the valuation today, and that is $4.20 per month. That would be the increase. And you can see how that would, flow from year to year.
So it's $1.05 more.
Correct. Based on today's values. Mm-hmm. And then and that kind of leads into the slide, how this last one worked and the change, how that functioned. And then how this would work in terms of that 10-year cycle. So you have operational levy, replacement levy, it's 6-year incremental, $2 million per year. We have a $71 million annual budget. So this is a $500,000 increase with our operating. And you would see us be able to go through 6 years without asking voters for any additional revenue. So this levy, this incremental levy, would be expiring in 2030, and the board then in 2030 would be asking voters to renew it, replace it. They would be having this conversation that you're having today. So that would be 4 levies that would be happening in 10 years. Obviously the permanent improvement is 2 of them, and that would be assuming to just ask to collect what we have today. So Randy, with this $2 million, it takes us out.
We gain a full year. It's essentially what you gain by the $2 million. And and obviously a full year plus obviously a little bit less of an ask when you do go back, or when we go back.
Mm-hmm. So debt mills are set to expire, growing community, students, hitting every single grade. And then the final one that we had heard was replacing the 8-year incremental levy with a $2 million. So taking the $2 million model and stretching it out to 8 years. So one, it secures, funding for 8 years. It matches the growth that we have. And we are maintaining a positive cash balance to 2031. It aligns with the presidential election, which we know is something that we talked about earlier. It would be structured the same way on this slide as it was for the 6-year, except obviously it would have 2 additional years. And I think the thing about this is you're collecting $2 million a year, whether it's a 6-year levy term or 8-year levy term, you're still hitting the same mark where you would need to ask voters for additional funds. So looking at that slide, you would have here operational levy 2024, permanent improvement levy 2025, and then we just as we showed you with the 6-year, we would need to consider additional revenue in 2030 or making reductions in 2030. And then this levy, 8-year, would expire at 2032. And so that's, 5 levies in 10 years, and then the additional, and then the additional funds there, so, in 2030. So, again, so that's kind of an outline of those. So this is kind of a summary page of the different options that we covered today. The option A is revenue, renew the levy but no additional funds for 4 years and beyond. Option A is renewing the levy, going kind of the other extreme with continuing and knowing that there'd be some additional funds needed in 2027. Option B is a 6-year incremental levy, $1.5 million a year. And we know that additional funds would be needed possibly with that through November 2029. Option C, November 2030 is when you'd go back to voters. And then option D, which is 8-year, but we know that November of 2030, there would be an ask of voters or reductions, depending on what the board at that time. This is another way to kind of look at this. So on the far left column is the year, takes us out to 2033. And then across the top are the different options. And you can kind of see how they compare side by side in terms of when things have to happen, when the board at that point in time would need to consider going out for new funds. So purple obviously is the PI. And light blue is new funds. Phase red are the cuts, and the operational levy expires is in black. So you can see that. So we'll turn it over for discussion. So thank you.
Can I ask a clarification question before we jump?
Absolutely. I'd say that's next. What clarifying questions do we have?
On this, back to the next chart that we were just on, the last one, slide, whatever that is. So I just want to clarify, in option C, 2030, there needs to be some blue ink in that box, because that would have to be an increase.
Correct.
Request. So I just want to clarify that.
Yep.
We need some.
Blue ink, just like on option D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it would need to be the renewal of the existing plus sum. Okay.
It's a good clarification. Any other clarifying questions? Thank you again, both of you, for that presentation. I certainly feel like you did a great job accumulating and summarizing and reacting to the discussion we had at the work session.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And helping kind of fill in some blanks from that discussion to help us, do the work that we need to do now. So this is going to be our third time as a board. First time was kind of that basic education, a little bit of Levy 101 for all of us. the board session turned into, let's call it, I like to use the term, opening conversation, where was everybody's positions, what would be helpful. Now it gets a little bit more complicated. Now the ask is a little bit more, we want to start turning this into a decision. I don't know that we get to a decision today, but we do have some actions, some options for actions in this board agenda that we can consider. But I do hope that we can start to turn this into, bringing this issue to closure, because we kind of need to, right? As we talked about in the board meeting, we've got a June 30th, July 1 deadline, without a lot of time between here and there. So here are 4.5 options for us to consider, kind of like last time. And I won't go down the line. Whoever wants to kind of open it up with their comments and thoughts, the floor is yours. So.
I just want to ask one question going on with what Susan asked. When you're talking about the new money in 2030, we're still looking at 1.25 to 1.75 mils, I'm assuming. The missing blue on 2030 in option C. When we talk about new funds are needed.
Correct.
Okay.
We're talking about that millage, but it also depends on the term, right?
Right.
At that time, but it's so, in some ways it's so far out, that's an estimate, but,
Guess.
as you know, farther away we get from today, the cloudier the crystal ball is. But that's a starting point, I would say.
Can you edit that?
I want to start out by thanking y'all for doing this presentation. To say that you heard us with our concerns, our thoughts, that to me, when I walked out of there, felt like they were all over the place. Yet you took it and answered our questions. You put it in a format that even I can understand. I am so impressed with this as to what you did. And especially this final slide, which if I counted correctly, 65, it's number 66 maybe?
65, yeah.
63, 64, 65, yeah. That makes it very clear to me. I mean, to me, option A is no. I mean, it's just a flat out no. So then you go to option A1. Two things that I don't think I'm seeing in the presentation that are reality would be a board choosing to make the PI levy renewal continuing. I think anybody with a logical way of thinking realizes that, when did we vote that in? 2000, early 2000s?
1980.
1980. It hasn't changed since 1980. And how many buildings have we added? How many of our buildings are a year or two older than from 1980? I think anybody can realize that the PI levy is at such a bare minimum that to make that a basis and a renewal would make sense, or I mean continuing would make sense. So that would be an option that could be foreshadowed in here. And we need another color because there's nothing about a bond issue for our much needed new school. And that's not really our question per se as we're looking at this, but it is a reality in looking at the future. I mean, I know we have immediate needs now, but in looking at the charts that you had for each option that showed the timeline of when each one would come out, that I think I wrote down correctly. It shows where on those charts where a bond ask would be possibly more tolerable to the public than not, when you've got levies every other year or every 2 or 3 years and no relief and a lot of renewals and a lot of asks and all of that, that doesn't favor another school being built, which obviously we need, or a bond issue to upgrade the elementaries that we have. So I think that it behooves us to be thinking about those boards in the future as to how that might fit in the maps that Tom has presented. Which doesn't make it any easier. But as I say, I don't see option A as an option. I really don't.
I don't either.
That would so fundamentally change our district and really put an emphasis on that one slide where the National Board of Realtors say that home values in school districts work hand in hand. And just ask any failing school district what their school or housing property values are at, and you can see the correlation. So I'm looking at A1 through D. I think it's irresponsible to not ask for money that we need to accommodate the growth, and I think an incremental levy is a very palatable way to ask for that. And do I remember correctly that we would be voting for this in 2024? Did all of the options, A1 through D, was there an ask, or there would be a collection in 2025? Am I remembering that correctly?
The collection would be the same as it currently is in 2025.
Yeah.
Or 2024 is the same collection we would have in 2025.
So you vote on in November. That then is assessed in 2024, payable in 2025.
True.
And in every case, it would be the same.
It would be the same in every
amount
case.
that the same dollar figure, the same fixed sum would be collected next year.
But in okay, I think I'm answering my question. In 2024, we've got the 1.85 that we're collecting. In 2025, we are not collecting the 1.85. I'm not, I think I see what I did. My mind's jumping to a totality and not staying on
Let me see if I
this
can help
option.
you. Two things to separate: the assessment year and the collection year.
Mm-hmm.
The assessment year for the bond that's falling off, the last year is this year. The last year for the collection year is 2025.
Oh,
Okay, so when you renew the levy in November, it's essentially, it's starting over on January 1. So it's assessed in 2024, you collect it in 2025. Okay, so in this case, all the options would collect the same amount as they do today in 2025, right? It's assessed in 24, it's collected in 2025. If you do an incremental, it's assessed in 2025 and collected in 2026. That's what gets confusing. That's why we put assessment year up there, because it's like the bond issue. The assessment is done after this year, but there's one more year of collection because we collect a year in arrears. It gets so, it's confusing.
no, I think where I was getting myself confused was, all right, so we're looking at this one right now, so it says plus 1.44, but that's just in relation to this ask. In 2025, there would be that 1.44 plus the last year of the high school bond, right? And then in 2026, it would be 1.44 without the 1.85.
Actually,
Am I close?
you're close.
Close. I wouldn't put the plus 1.85 in 2025. I'd put a minus 1.85 in 2026.
Exactly.
On this chart, to kind of get to that concept.
Actually, so think about it. So that's the assessment year. That's not the collection year. So 2024 is the assessment year. The collection year is 2025. The next one, the 1.44 mils, the assessment year is 2025, collection 2026. So the bond will be gone by then. So in the second year, so the 2025 assessment year, that's a negative net effect.
Okay.
It's confused because we're talking about collection and assessment, and it's I have to reset myself all the time and just write it down because you're always a year behind.
Okay.
And that's why we put assessment year up there to try to separate that. So the bond assessment is done, but we don't collect it yet.
Okay.
And then the next year you assess the incremental, but you don't collect it till the following year, right? So.
But the impact on the taxpayer is, when we talk about the impact on our real estate taxes,
It's in
the collection year. Thank you, yeah.
So the first collection year, there'd be no change. I mean, assuming all things were equal, right? Now, we know the effective millage will drop because we have new construction, all that kind of stuff. But we don't know what that is, so we got to base it on current valuation.
Okay, so the first collection year is 2025.
And it's
Great.
zero, right? The increased millage will be zero if all the options are the same. Because the incremental piece of it is not assessed until 2025 and collected in 2026. That year, then, if you go up your incremental and then the collection on the bond is no more, you have a net something less than zero. Then the third year, then you're going to see the full impact of the incremental, whatever that effective rate is at that point. Now, we have to use today's valuation to communicate that. Obviously, we expect it to be less, but I don't know if it's a little bit less. And in theory, if housing prices fell through the floor, it could go the other way, obviously. Now, no one expects that to happen. Well, there's a few people who do, but the sky has fallen a number of times, so anyway, sarcasm.
So, get it. So what, I think you're making my point, I'm just wondering, is it in 2026 that the net between the high school bond and the incremental collection is negative?
2025. 2026, yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, 2026 collection year.
Okay.
Yes,
Got it, okay.
yes.
I'm not gonna say anything more because I'll break it if I say anything more. I think I got it.
If you can wrap your mind around that, you're doing better than 99% of Ohioans, so.
Okay, all right. No, I think I got that now. Yep. So this one here, oh, that's the 2 million. So which option am I looking at? We're looking at the D?
C.
That's C.
C, that's C?
Yeah.
Okay. And C, I love those little line graphs that you did, Randy, too. Those are pretty cool.
The problem is I can do those all day and more lines than you want to see.
Well, I think what they do is that they show the responsible nature of the choices that we are forced here to make in a very simplistic manner. So the lighter blue line is the I gotta make this bigger, yeah.
You can tell where they fall off, how many years they are, right? The 4-year falls off quickly. The obviously continues out. And if you notice, like the red one, that's a 4-year incremental. Why is it lasts a little bit longer? That's because our collection years are split between 2 fiscal years. So I don't want to get into that. So when you talk about, let's, a 6-year or a 4-year incremental, we actually have 3 fiscal years that collect the full amount, and then 2 fiscal years that collect half. That adds up to 4. So that's why, like, when you see the incrementals, they last a little bit longer because you get half the payoff in the last year and half in the first year. Fiscal year, that is.
So I'm looking at slide 59, Tom. Just to make sure that I'm reading this correctly, that with the 8-year, is that right? The 8-year incremental?
Which one?
We run out of money in 32,
31.
31.
When it crosses 0.
The
yeah.
1.5 million or the 2 million?
I'm looking at,
Green is 2 million.
So the green and the 2
Million.
blues that run together and they separate, they're kind of running, and at 31 they separate. The 8-year gets you like a half more. It gets you a little bit more, but they follow the same trajectory. It's just a matter of time.
oh, I get the difference now. The 8-year with the blue that extends out, that's the 1.5, and the 8-year, that's the green, that's the 2 million then.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And you're looking that far out. That's the other thing. We project about the cash balance, right? That is so far out there that we got to be thinking about it, and that's our benchmark. But there's things potentially you do in between times, right? And so, obviously, the more time we have to make other adjustments, programming or, if state funding changes to react to it.
Okay.
And this is one of those tests where there may not be no right answer, there's just a better answer.
Oh, don't you hate those? Tom, one thing that would help me on this would be to have a label here, option A, B, C, D, QRS. Because I'm having to juggle too many things in my head.
Thank you, Ms. Larimer. We'll let you, I'll talk for a little bit. Thank you for your comments. Who else would like to offer up some feedback for the board to consider? Any good on the line? Ms. Menke?
I guess I would go back to what I said at the last work session. I do recognize that there's voter fatigue, and there will always be voter fatigue. But I do know that our constituents appreciate the ability to control when and where their tax dollars go. I think we do have to be very cognizant of the voter message from the past 2 bond issues, and I know they're bond issues and not operating issues, but I think it is a good gauge of where we are at economically, with the cost of living right now, and really the alignment of financial priorities within households of our community. I think we are in a period in the area of we need to give a little to get a little. Again, carried on conversation again this past week with people that this past incremental levy was a shock this year. And I'm just hearing from a lot of people that
I'm sorry, which past incremental levy?
this one that we're in right now, the past, as I'm saying, as it's,
The
Almost
fact
over.
that this one's expiring is a shock?
no.
Okay.
The amount that it ended up coming up to, and especially with the revaluation on top of that, because we hit the floor, and correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, but we, with hitting the floor, we did receive about, what, 4 million more? And they don't see it as they know it's there from the school, but it was a shock to them because of that. And again, like I said, the state and county auditors, they're still looking at property valuation, but there is, at this point, no relief in sight for anybody within the state. And I know that we have members here in the district that are very conscientious, like James, who has doing a great job with cost avoidance and looking where we can tighten. But I think it's something that we have to look at a little bit more strongly. I want to make sure that we have a levy on that is going to pass, because if it fails, the immediate cuts that we're going to have to make to stay in tune with where we need to be, it's not going to be fun. And to sit there and wait again for another levy to come on and make up for that, I don't think it's a good idea for our community.
So I'm hearing support for option A from you. Okay.
Support for A or A1?
Hey,
A, knowing that we would be cutting that much and going through that much RIF.
those are, what's on there is what was proposed by, I take it, administration, and past ideas of what was on there, but I think it would be something that we'd have to look at and look at what we have added over since that time. You know, what we've also added with the addition of ESSER and ARP funds. I mean, if you look at it, if you want to talk about it in terms of students or in terms of teachers, if you're going to do an incremental levy and it's 1.5 million, that's equivalent to about 125 new students coming in a year, which is, what, about 2.28%. If you look at it in terms of teachers, and that's saying roughly that, you know, with teacher cost and their benefits, that's saying like $100,000 a teacher, that would be 15 teachers a year. Just think of it in that context.
Well, but I was going to recommend $70 million, just 3% inflation is $2 million. 2.1, that's just inflation. That's nothing new. Mm-hmm. That's the challenge.
The cost isn't just that clear cut for a student and a teacher, because with that comes all the other things we're required with transportation, food service. If the student's special needs, then that throws the equation out of whack. And I mean, to me, option A is dead in the water. I mean, I can't even see that is being, I do not see that as keeping our school system in the excellent state that we provide for our students and our families and our community is not provided in option A.
So are you saying that if we did not have those same levels, if you're looking at our teachers and our programs, if we took those teachers and those programs and you put them over to, let's say, TPS, are you going to get the same result?
That's your field.
That's comparing apples to oranges. You can't even ask that question.
Well, if it's teachers and programs,
And you're talking about socioeconomic status versus living in a suburban district. I can't
and
even.
we have a certain social economical status here.
Somebody tell me how many students do we have on free and reduced lunch?
13.
About 10, 11%.
10 or 11%. The elementary schools,
550.
some of our elementary schools are 100%. So you're trying to compare apples to oranges. And going along with this, I'm going to go with you, Sue. You look at this. I mean, this is Perrysburg right here. You're going to cut a business teacher. Do we not just have the DECA advisor in here a couple meetings ago? All those kids and all those awards and all those programs and all those scholarships, I'm not willing to take that away. Not willing to do that. I don't even have kids in this district anymore. We don't plan on moving anytime soon, because if I wanted to, I mean, you look at your home values versus other school districts. Even though houses are still selling quickly, I'm not excluding or downplaying anyone's, home budgets, because we're all in that. But I am not sitting on this board. I was not elected to hatchet or take apart our district. We're here to make sure that every single one of our students is successful. And when I look at that, there's no way.
Are you on 23?
I'm on 23. Just looking at those projected reductions, I mean, that's not even.
So I had a question about that slide, Tom, and I didn't want to interrupt you. When you say that we're getting rid of you mentioned DECA or the Art Club or Key Club Advisor. When you get rid of a club advisor like that, does that mean that the club then goes away because there's no advisor, right?
Correct.
Wow.
And you got to point out, that's 2019, okay?
Yeah.
Right.
We're just sharing the thought process and the template. In 2025, 24, 25, it'll be different, but it'll be similar.
Right.
Right.
I totally understand, and I remember what Katie did to come up with that presentation, because this is the presentation that she gave us at the retreat, right?
Right, and the board, so there was a process that we used to do this, to arrive at this information. The unions met with us, they were involved in the conversations. They don't point who goes, but they make sure that any questions or we're doing it the right way, and then the Board of Education endorsed this plan and said if it fails, this is what we're going to do moving forward, so.
And to be clear, our supplementals, for example, which obviously in the high school and the junior high is a lot of supplementals, our total supplementals for the district is about $1 million, a little less than $1 million, $920,000 this year is our supplementals. That's just the salary portion. And obviously there's retirement and stuff. So it gets to be about $1 million. So, that's a direct programming cost, right? That kind of gives perspective. You could cut all of that, and it doesn't, you cut that, you cut all of supplies and materials, you cut all our capital spending, and you can cut a good portion of purchase services, and you still don't balance the budget. It's all got to be in, if you look at our payroll, $44 million, $36 million of it, $33 million of it is certified staff. $5 million, $10 million for everyone else.
So when you talk about supplementals, you're talking about athletic coaches too, not just.
Athletics and all supplementals.
All supplementals. You're talking about academic,
advisors.
fine arts, everything.
May I ask a point of clarification to Mrs. Menke? Ms. Menke, can we go to slide 65 again? I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Mr. Hostler, can you pull that up? So, Ms. Menke, you're supporting option A, not option 8.1, where we would cut
yes.
$3 million in 2025.
Well, that is if we want to go through until, what, expires in 28. I think right now, to give people some relief for 2 years, and then I would say when we're going to do this, and this is what I said also during the work session, is with the understanding that we are going to have to come back probably sooner than later and before the end of that levy for more money, but we understand that right now with things economically, people are not able to open up their pocket and hand out money.
So you're suggesting then like an 8.2 where cuts are made but new funds are requested before 2028.
Yes.
Okay. I guess, so one of the things I want to go back to is to raise the point that, and I think Mr. Drury, you were getting there, that the one point, I think it's really important, especially for the public that might want to listen to this meeting or read about it, that 1.5 million from the incremental levy has not covered in any way growth that it barely has covered inflation, because we add, in our old contract, it was costing us $2 million a year just to give the contracted increases. And the new contract that we all approved unanimously at the last meeting gives larger increases than we had in the old contract. So I just want to be really clear that the incremental amount of 1.5 that we're currently collecting doesn't even cover current staffing, let alone growth in terms of year-to-year costs. And then I think it's important, especially when we talk about the 20 mil floor, the extra, and I'm going to say extra here, but I'm going to backpedal that was, again, budgeted in, representing the fact that state funding and the 1.5 incremental in no way has kept up with our growth. So I think I just really want to be clear that the money coming from the incremental and even the 20 mil floor was completely needed. And we're at the point where we do need additional funds if we don't want to ask for, we're going to have to ask for additional funds. We all know that. We're all agreeing that that has to happen. I think we're all responding to the idea of what your proposal then is to how to cut the $3 million.
Okay, and that's just it's gonna buy time, right? And going back to recognizing the incremental.
I'd like Ms. Menke to answer
Okay,
that
sorry.
question of what it looks like to cut $3 million, because I think that that's what all of our concerns are. Because we can cut every single extracurricular and we've only cut $1 million. That, I don't know how to do A without the 2019, knowing that those are 5 years ago without inflation numbers. So we'd probably have to, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like.
If I build on that, then it's also the plan to come back. Because I don't think you just turn a light switch off and turn it back on in a
That is correct.
organization as complex as this.
That's correct.
I think all of a sudden you've got recruiting, retention.
We've lost those people.
Yeah, and it doesn't come back because there's a promise that maybe we're able to do new funds in 2026, 2027. I mean, really, we're talking about bringing back a district.
From the grave.
I didn't want to say in the grave, but I think that's
Pretty much.
thought that was in my head, 5 years out. It's difficult to do.
So we have to do all 5 of those slides, right? To 23 through 27 in order to cut, shall we say, $3 million for inflation. I know it says 2.7, but 3 million probably today. All 5 of those slides would have to occur in order just to do that first point of option A.
So those slides were from 2019, where we had to cut 2.7 million mid-year. So what's listed there is because it was a mid-year reduction, we had to overshoot because you have to go through a bumping and you have to mid-year reductions. What can you cut? What can't you cut? And so it wouldn't be the same thing that you're seeing there. So I don't want to give people the impression that this becomes today's cut list.
Right, no,
This
but
is
it's the same,
you're at the
idea.
same address.
the same recipe.
Right. There would be there would be different lists on there, but that gives you the idea of the scope of where you have to go to get there.
Pretty
Because at
extensive.
the elementary school, again, that won't change much because they don't have extracurriculars. They don't have all those things. You can't cuss. You can't cut.
Yes, you can cuss.
You can't cut elementary busing, but you can with secondary busing. So there's all those kinds of things that would be very similar, and we would update those numbers. But at any rate, I think it would be a challenge to go to the voters in terms of saying, we want you to support this levy. At the same time, we're going through RIF meetings and making reductions. I think that would be a hard conversation to have with people that want to support the schools. Why should I support a levy when you're cutting all these programs? That would be
Oh, that's a good way to
a challenging can't say selling point, but that would be a challenging argument to compel people to vote for the district. Because it'd be a unique approach.
And just remember, anytime you talk about reductions, early reductions are worth more than late reductions, right? So hypothetically, if you're worried about the end of 4 years not being able to renew that levy, and I'm just I'm not saying that, please don't take this as a recommendation. Let's say in 2026, you say we're going to do this, and just to protect ourselves, notice this levy would have to be renewed in 4 years. We did a $3 million reduction in 2026, year after next. That gets you essentially one more year, right? So if something happened, you didn't renew it, you didn't replace it, it gains you a year. If you waited until 2027 to do that $3 million, oops, 30 is nice, but I don't think we're going to get 30. You don't gain that full year, because you lose a year of compounding on the reduction. So when we start talking about reductions, it's a difficult one because the timing on it's everything, right? $1 million today reduction is worth more than $1 million 2 years from now, and so that's the risk the board has to weigh. You know, to Ms. Mickey's point, if you want to put a levy on every 4 years, then you got to have that in your back pocket, because you have no room for error, whatever that happens to be. And that's right, because you're done. We have a cash balance now, fortunately, but that was kind of planned, right? With the with everything we have a cash balance, and all these options take away that cash balance over time. So the taxpayers have prepaid for a few years now, and then it's gonna catch up. And I think is where do you want it to catch up? You want to catch up 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, whatever that case may be.
I mean, if you're looking at cuts, option A1, by the mere fact that it's no new money, but makes it a continuing, so it gives you what you said you wanted as far as giving the public a chance to breathe a little bit. I mean, we'd have to talk about the PI levy, but I know this is a topic for next year, but I would suggest that the PI levy become a continuing. So if in A1 you've got the operational becoming a continuing with your new fund thing at 2027, knowing that A1 is not giving us enough money to operate. So that's going to force some cuts in and of itself, right?
Yeah, and one more thought for you, and I know you guys are wrestling with a lot here, but think about going back to what Ms. Roland Miller shared about the auditor's advice, if you will, on levies. In the old days, the burden was really on the administration to work with the levy committee to get things done, right? So we could spearhead that, get things done, and there was a burden, there's more of a burden there. That burden is we can no longer do that. So you're relying more and more on volunteer help to get it done. Mm-hmm. And that in itself is a challenge to think about. The burnout just on the group, because let's be honest with each other. If you had no levy campaign, you have no chance. The opposition to any levies doesn't need a campaign to say no. To get people to say yes needs a campaign. And so you got to think about how you're going to do that. And the 5 board members, as a representative of the public, of the constituency, it falls on you, because Tom and I can't do that anymore. We can share information, but we really can't advocate like we used to be able to. And that's a challenge. So, like I said, I don't know if there's any right answer, perfect answer, but that's why you guys get the $125.
So for me, I want to acknowledge what's already been mentioned during the meeting, that Mr. Juror noted that supplies, that things were under budget, that cuts have been made, that significant savings we heard earlier were made in the operational side. So I do want to acknowledge that there is savings going on in the district, and that is a concern for the entire administration. It's certainly a concern for us on the board. So to cut another $3 million, to me, option A is not feasible to me in a way that maintains the excellence of our students' experience. We know that learning, that development, that what happens for our students doesn't just happen in the classroom. And that is something that I think all of us value in our district, whether it's the marching band or whether it's Spanish club or wherever it happens. It's not just the sports field either. So for me, options A, I honestly hadn't even considered those, partly because it does require us to go back constantly to be asking for money to the electorate. And not only are the volunteers tired, but I do think there is a saturation point that we've hit in our communications of how much people want to hear about the schools every 2 years. I personally had only been even considering options B, C, or D. The 6 or 8 year, I'd love to do a continuing. I'm not sure that is wise right now in a time where people have had so much financial challenge in the last year or two, and people are still kind of recovering. I'm still recovering. I think all of us are still recovering from the jump in our tax bills. So I will not be looking for a continuing levy right now for this operational levy. I'm torn between the $1.5 million, which is what we're currently collecting, in recognition that is, we can say this is not a new tax structure. This is what we've been doing, and we're asking you for the same thing. At the same time, our costs are going up because there's growth and we have more classroom teachers, and we approved a contract that requires more. And I think that contract was a good one, and I'm happy to recognize our staff with a larger increase year after year, but we do need more funds. So I think the $2 million, personally, I'm interested in the 8 year. That it's a way to say we recognize that that our electorate has the right in Ohio to say yes or no to taxes, but that we have a need to be able to plan. And an 8 year allows us to plan around permanent improvements. It allows us to plan around our facility needs, and asking for that bond issue at some point in the near future for the new elementary school and for our maintenance needs. So I want to limit expenses. I want to limit expenses by not having to borrow money. I mean, I think one of the things that a school district could easily not have to do is to not borrow money, but that requires us to have we have to have a bank account that has money in it to get us through January and that huge dip. So right now, we certainly, people could point to our bank account and say you don't need the money, but in January we do. I don't want to pay to borrow more money if we don't have to. I like the incremental because it does allow new construction, new property in our new property value in the district to offset each of our costs. Again, that the mills decrease over time with the incremental. So honestly, I'd like to probably throw out there that I'm for option D, that I think the $2 million recognizes the needs that we have right now in the district, the growth, the inflationary, the contractual obligations we have, and the 8 year allows voters to say yes or no, and they're going to get to say it again in 8 years, but it gives us the time to plan, which is what we also heard from the community of having longer term plans.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ruffert.
Thank you, Mr. Bennington. So obviously you see that I'm passionate about our school district. I'm passionate about our kiddos. I get a little fired up when we talk about reducing and whittling away at what our district represents, I'm passionate about what the district provides to students and our families. Knowing my two kids who went through and have graduated, also their friends, their classmates, I know that if it wasn't for a lot of these extracurricular activities, it was a lifeline for a lot of our kiddos. And I'm not willing to take that away. I agree with you, Ms. Roland Miller. I'm wavering between C and D. Was nowhere on my radar. I cannot ask people to come back 4 or 5 times in 10 years while pretty much decimating the district. Knowing what I do in human resources, and I know recruitment and retention is very important to what happens in a school district, and being on personnel and sitting there and talking about, you know, as much as I hate to say it, we joke. And I said, welcome to the real world. When we have, would we have 31 new hires this year in Perrysburg? And that is not typical. Am I correct in saying that?
Yep.
So a lot of people are leaving school districts. I think just coming down to bare bones, people are not going to want to come and work in a school district, this district or any district that doesn't have anything other than books and desks for our students. Also, we talk a lot about portables, or trailers, whatever you want to call them. That's a reality. If we don't have money, that's going to have to come out of our operating funds, correct, Mr. Dreer? We've talked about that. And nobody wants to teach in a portable. No matter how much you make it look good, no matter what you have in it, nobody wants to do that. And I challenge you, if you think you do, come on in and let's sit in there for a day and see kids going back and forth and having to go to the bathroom and trying to communicate and raining and everything else. I've lived that. I've had teachers that live that. I've talked to teachers who are in there in this district, and that is not anything that we want to do. So again, going back between option C and D, I know that someone paid for me to go to school as a public school student. Someone paid for my parents. I paid for kiddos, and I'm going to continue to do that because that is what we need to do to make our students successful and have a good community.
Thank you. Yeah, so for me, there is another option out there that I'm just going to touch on lightly that I would not even advance, but it's what I really want, would be the continuing incremental for amounts greater than $2 million to really set this district up for success for now and for future boards. Where I get hung up on option D is kind of what goes on in there. My eyesight's getting a little bad there, but that need for new funds there in 2030 starts to not differentiate too much from option C for me. Plus, I agree with Ms. Menke that I don't think a continuing is politically expeditious. I don't think it works. I don't think it gets voted on. So that takes me out of A1 and as well as my idea about a continuing, because our voters do want and do deserve some say in how this district spends money from time to time, balancing against that polarity that being on the ballot every 4 years or more is not, it doesn't serve us when it comes to planning, when it comes to voter fatigue, when it comes to messaging really well, when it comes to taking comments, hits it about lack of strategic planning or just lack of planning in general. So there's a sweet spot in there that I'm trying to navigate, and for me, I believe that's option C. Another thing about an 8-year for me is a little bit of a lack of accountability. I haven't fully thought this through, but of future boards too. You know, that's like a long time to go, even between board elections, for the voters to say, the board's kind of fully funded out there, the district's fully funded out there, we don't have a say, and we can't even kind of take it through at the next board election because that funding's set out there. Option C seems to align it a little bit closer to board elections as well. And then when I look at the amounts between B and C, 1.5 incremental versus a $2 million incremental, I'm practically thinking through, these numbers are laid out here, $1.05 a month on a $100,000 home. For the $2 million, incremental that cleans up that ballot schedule or that ballot calendar as I'm looking at it here just makes the most sense to me. Ms. Larimer, I happen to agree with you too. The PI levy being continuing is going to be a good discussion for next year. Because, yeah, I would tend to agree with you there, but that's a conversation for next year as well. So I guess I don't have much more to add. I probably agree with everybody in this room to some extent. But that is what then takes me down to C.
Takes you to C, huh?
6-year, $2 million. To balance that need to give the voters control, give the district what it needs financially, and clean up the levy calendar. Cleaning up the levy calendar is a thought that boards prior to you and I, Sue, joining this board have talked about. If there was never an opportunity to do that, how would that look? I never thought there was until this board came together and we really started to talk about it that existed, that possibility was out there. But I see this and that is appealing to me.
This is a great chart. Really lays it out there pretty. It seems like C is a nice compromise between the A's, B, and D.
I'm just going to raise my concern because I started at C. I've been at C. Although I'd like, anyway. My concern is that in 2030, it means that we would have, at that point, it would be about $25 million from the incremental increases. It would be over 25 million. Actually 6, 12, 25, yeah, over 25.5 million. That would be on the ballot. At the same time, we also need to increase. We need to increase funds. So this, we've talked about not wanting to necessarily put on a renewal or with also an initiative that requires new funding. And that would stick us in that case of both $25.5 million on the ballot as well as an increase.
Well, you've got the same conundrum at option D, although not the dollars at stake in 2030, but also in there, and it's tough to talk about what future boards or administrations would do, but there's the opportunity to cut those costs and avoid that incremental ask. I mean, you've got an incremental ask in 2030 under the 8-year. Yes, you've got an incremental ask in 2030 under the 6-year, although bigger dollars are at stake in that year. So I'm not getting all the way there on the concern about the incremental dollars along with the full ask. I mean, if that is a concern going out in that future, then yeah, it would be great to avoid the need for additional dollars in any one of those scenarios going out into the future.
Yeah, I guess I do assume that new funds will be needed, somewhere in the, obviously, 2009 to 2030. Yeah, 2029, going back in time.
New funds were needed in 2009, too.
Yeah. Well,
you weren't wrong.
2030, yeah, I just wanted to raise that. That's the concern I have for that one.
Because you've got, 4 things there? The operational, new funds, 3 things. I can count.
Well, really, 2 things. That would be one ballot initiative, but it would not be a renewal. There would be an incremental ask in that operating levy in that year.
I'm looking at C.
Yep.
And because then you've got to renew that one or do something with it. You're also asking for additional money. And if you don't make the PI continuing, then you've also got that. So you've got a lot of money in 2030 that if we're having heart palpitations now, would probably put our administration over the edge into the funny farm in 2030 with that scenario.
I guess I don't see how that, we're looking out a long time horizon. I don't see where those, so we're just kicking those heart palpitations exist in how schools are funded in the great state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of when do you want the administration to have those heart palpitations?
Well, I think
2032 versus 2030?
Yeah, well, I think we're trying to look at not only for our administration and our school and our kids, but how how it filters out a little bit better, so that in option D, let's make the assumption that the PI is continuing. You would just have in 2030, talk about voter fatigue, you would just have that 1.25 to 1.75 ask there. Then 2 years later, then what do you do with the operational levy?
I hear you. I hear you. And, hey, I'm the one that started by saying, let's do an 8-year continuing for more money than we're seeing here. Or I'm sorry, 8-year, that doesn't make sense, but let's do an incremental continuing for more dollars in this. My issue with that, as it is with the 8-year, is the ability to pass it in 2024. That's my concern about it.
Well, the more I look at it, I'm leaning, I think D is more responsible. But if the board wanted, and I will go along with the board, but I think D is more of a responsible and intellectual, logical ask. And reduces the voter fatigue.
We need to be careful that we don't cut ourselves off at the knees. We are going to need an increased PI because of the age of our buildings. We are going to need a bond issue here soon. Actually, I think we're past the point of needing a bond issue, not only with our elementaries, but the high school. We know that there's overcrowding there. And we always talk about the portables, but let's face it, the portables have been in this district since 1970. It's the one thing that I hear from everyone who's lived here since then. At this rate, it's not going away. I think we need to be careful, especially with our community, on what emotions that we play on. And we are always looking at, or I'm always hearing mentioned, cutting things for kids. There are ways that we can look at tightening the belt. I've been in a district before that's done it. It's not pretty, but when it's necessary, it's necessary.
Well, I guess you've been asked twice now. I'd love to hear, can you give me one example of a cut that would be significant enough to give this board to even begin to consider option A?
I would, like I said, I would look back at what we did with ESSER and ARP. And really, looking back at what we have hired since this initial passing in 2019 of the current incremental levy, and taking a look at all those positions that were put in there. Because when you look at the student things like the extracurricular, that's just nickel and diming. It's not going to make any significant amount. We know, though, that if it is, for example, how many social workers have we hired in the past?
There it is.
4 or 5 years?
I think 2.
So if we look at the cost of a social worker in between salary and their benefits, what are we getting?
Social workers are paid at the same level as a teacher, so it would be the equivalent of 2 teachers. So that's, $75,000 a person, depending on their, health care plan. So that's $150,000.
And
So
what
the
else have
money-
we added in the last 5 years? What have we added with the ESSER specifically?
So the ESSER, because we knew it was one-time money, we were really careful with how we spent it. So we spent it a lot on programming, training, so that we weren't in that position. So there were some positions that we, continued to keep. Intervention, support, gap closing has always been a target of those. So that continues to be where we are. So, and again,
So I asked for an example. You gave me One example, which is what I asked for, you gave me more of a process to go through, and I understand the process and the mindset of where you would look to cuts, where you'd recommend it, and I got to tell you, I disagree with it. So I would not go there, even if we went down option A, because I'm not going to do anything that, along with what other board members have already said tonight about swerving into and really changing the fabric of this community, also not going to do anything that in this day and age works backwards on the mental health and emotional stability of our students.
Well, and that's where I would speak with the county on that, because, you know, the explanation at our retreat was that because there wasn't consistency from the county. So maybe we need to be speaking to the county and having that conversation on why isn't there consistency and what can they do to help us, because as a taxpayer, I feel like I'm paying double. I'm paying the
Consistency for
school to
what?
do this, and I'm paying the county to do this.
Consistency
So-
on what? I'm not recalling that from the retreat. County and consistency for what?
With like the
County didn't
social
provide
worker.
a social worker.
Well, it was children's services that they were talking about, and the issues that they were having with families and how it came across with the school. And that's what the reasoning was of why we have as many as we have, and what they were doing.
I don't believe that's correct. I don't think social workers are replacing school counseling services through the county. And when you talk about ESSER funds, and I want to put this out there because I want everybody to hear that too, going along with what Mr. Hostler said, we don't have any fluff with ESSER funds. We don't have somebody sitting in an office getting paid by ESSER because that money is gone. That money was used for programming, not for people. So when you look at $2 million, I mean, we don't have a lot of fluff. So what are you going to do? Cut high school busing? That's almost 900,000. Am I correct? From 2019? So no busing at the high school. That would take a significant chunk of what you're saying is fluff. You're willing to do that?
And that was
I would
fun
have
when
to
we
look
did
at
that.
what all is available out there for cuts. I mean, in the past, when I've dealt with it, it's not a one meeting thing. I mean, you sit there and you look at it, you mull over how much it's gonna do for you in the long run. It's not easy, it's not pretty, but sometimes it has to be done.
And it was a different school district. Again, you cannot compare apples to oranges. You were where? Genoa? Am I correct? I'm just asking because I can't remember if it was Lake or Genoa.
Do we have free and reduced here in this community?
Not what I'm asking you.
Do we have seniors in this community?
Senior.
Do people need to make a choice of whether or not they're putting food on the table or they're buying their medicine? Does everybody have extra money in their savings account?
What does that have to do? You're saying you did it at Genoa.
I'm saying that right now, people are going to have to make a choice of whether or not they want to pay for education or whether they want to be able to keep up with their household expenses and even where they've pared back. I don't want to see us cutting ourselves off at the knees
And
for
again,
things that we need to be able to do in
I
the
want to
future.
acknowledge that cuts and savings are made. I'm nervous whenever we don't acknowledge that there have been a lot of savings generated, that there is concern for that. I think one of the things with 2019 to 2025 is that there are also mandates and requirements that a student wellness and well-being program is now, as of 2020, required by the state. So to have social workers providing that social well-being program is a necessity now versus just laying that additional mandate on existing staff where our counselors are already juggling 400 students. They can't address some of those needs. And when I read about those programs, I'm grateful because they weren't in place when my kids and friends were going through and they were needed and they make such a difference and they could have made a difference back in the teens, but we didn't have them. So, when we look at some of the ESSER funding, initially and I'll speak again from the Business Advisory Council, we had so many ideas we want to engage. It's now a requirement of the state to engage students in workplace exploration and career education, that was just being laid on existing staff. To have the coordinator for careers and volunteer engagement position, that has been a game changer for our district. And all the plans that we talked about in Business Advisory Council are now being implemented because there's someone on the ground with students. So there are, we could say, well, we're gonna cut that person, but I think that's when we have to say, what are we cutting from our students? How do we continue to meet mandates? So to compare 2019 and 2024, we could go through that process. I also wanna say that I trust Mr. Hostler, I trust the staff that when positions have been added, they really are needed, that they are making a difference for our students in a way that's important and not just fluff or extra. So I've worked in a crisis center, and I know what it's like to stand across the table or sit across the table from someone who is in that difficult position. And I am not insensitive to that, but I also believe that we can't, there's no way we could get to 3 million without cutting the extracurriculars and the things that aren't mandated, like high school busing. We just can't get there. So we're working on it, and there's too many important things to support our students right now that I'm not willing to cut.
And I think, in pointing out, families that are in crisis. So do we have, families that are hungry, that are having to make these decisions? And the answer in our community is yes. And many of them have children who then come to school with facing those experiences, and then having staff that is dedicated to working with those students is essential to their success. The mission that we have as a district couldn't be fulfilled if we're not making sure that we have eyes on every one of those students that are coming from, the hunger. And then let's take that a step further, because it's not just, food and housing and the things that you were mentioning, Ms. Menke, but also you throw in mental health challenges, which are unprecedented today. And how do we make sure that we're doing that? Someone pointed out, the state chronic absenteeism is something that we're hearing a lot about. Right now it's 30% in the state. We're at 10% or below 10%. And I think it's because of these positions that are helping students and families be engaged in coming to school. So if you pull that out, there is a ripple effect that does impact children in other areas. So, social workers is a relatively new to the district experience. We've always had one. But when we started having 180, a caseload for one individual trying to make that work, and the county struggling with trying to keep up, we're in a position where we made that a priority, because without it, we're not achieving our mission. And so it's an essential piece of what we do, is getting those students that stability and the resources when they're in crisis to come to school, to learn, to feel safe. And I think we do a good job of that. So at any rate, I think it's important to keep that, kind of in perspective, that mental health, families in crisis, it's not anything like it's ever been in my career, like it's been this year.
I agree.
Or these years. So.
Which is noticeable in legislation that's being passed in certain states about social media. Eric, I would venture to say that we've had pretty profound discussion. I don't think anything's going to get decided tonight. Was wondering if you'd be interested in tabling this to a special meeting that we had for, the 27th? When was that?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Larimer. Can we confirm what that date is? Because I'm listening, and
27th.
The 27th, so I'm...
Can I ask what information or what conversation would we need to have that's different between now and that meeting that would allow us to make that decision?
I would think just people chewing on what we've said now, because either today or the 27th, we must give Randy a decision. We must. So we've got either, and I don't see that we're going to come to a strong consensus at this particular point
Particularly
today.
since we need a little bit more than a consensus as well. We need a super majority here.
You need a 4-to-1.
We need a 4 to 1.
4 to 1?
Yep, and I'm
Okay,
not-
so I think that's really important, and I think if we chewed on this new presentation and again, all the fabulous information that you gave us, we were looking at the date.
It is the 27th. we have
It
on the
is, yes,
calendar.
the 27th, and we had it at 6 o'clock, Lori.
I have it on the calendar for that. We just,
I would like to move that we table this to the 27th. And that way it'll give us time to ask our professionals here if we have any other questions that noodle us or throw things at you. Lucky you.
You really don't have to do anything.
For the,
Yeah, I mean, I suppose
resolution.
there are 3 resolutions of necessity sitting here in our
Sitting there,
agenda.
but if you don't act on them,
Pick up
any of
any of
them.
them.
Unless anybody wants to advance one, was gonna kind of,
And they're not in final form. I was, kind of waiting for terms and stuff to fill in the detail if you guys had consensus. And not to throw a curveball, I keep throwing more stuff at you, you could pass more than one resolution of necessity, have the county auditor do his calculation, and then,
but it is that resolution of necessity needed, and only that is needed by the end of the month?
I checked today to make sure we meet the timeline. Everything has to be buttoned up and final to the Board of Elections by August 7th. Typically, what, is you do the resolution of necessity in June, resolution to proceed in July. That gives us time, a couple weeks, to make sure we have the ballot language correct and all that before it goes to the Board of Elections. Okay, so there's a couple steps in there that it can be compressed. Okay, so I don't want to say we can't push it, but our attorneys are on top of this, so they'll be able to turn the language around real quick and stuff. But we got to provide some guidance. So you don't, I'm saying you have some time, but that time can get away.
Yeah, understood. So I guess maybe a lot, you did lose me there, and if, I'm a little concerned that we're going to come out on, July, even that June 27th meeting with potentially 2 resolutions of necessity. Does that still keep us moving?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
again, the resolution, sorry if I'm repetitive, but just to be clear, the resolution of necessity, all it does is say, hey, county auditor, the board recognizes we have a need for this levy. The county, will you calculate the millage? The county auditor sends the millage back. I present it to you in terms of resolution to proceed. You say, we got this, we agree, we have sample ballot language, all that. Then you say, go ahead and proceed. That's the next vote. That's then what I send to the Board of Elections. Okay, so there's a 2-step process. We just need a little bit of time in there to make sure that we have, like, the ballot language in particular, from our friends at Ottawa Hills can tell you, we want to make sure that's right. And that's not a shot at anyone. It's just one of those attention to detail things we just can't afford to let slip.
Just because I was keeping score. Susan, we had you at option D. Lori, you were at C or D. Eric, you were at C or D, and I have C circled.
I'm at C.
Lori, you were at option A, and Sue, I had you down at option D.
Okay.
So just for those keeping track at home. So is there any information that, at this moment that you're, so obviously our work is going to be bringing, it's A, C, and D are the ones that have been discussed and circled at some point. So obviously our focus and resolutions and preparing more information will focus more, deeply on that. So
Yeah, if you could give us with a 98% certainty, which one would pass, that would be great.
the magic 8 ball.
Any, you know, to Mr. Hosser's question, any additional information known tonight? I mean, reach out quickly if something comes into people's heads over the next couple of days so that they can tune up.
Going back to your, Mr. Hosser scorekeeping, are three options then that seem to be resonating with board members, A, C, and D?
Correct.
Okay. If nothing, obviously, if there's more information, we'll get that. I will have those languages solidified for you, so we have them verbatim for you, okay? And then whatever information else you need to help work through this decision.
Would you feel more comfortable if we just went ahead and passed those three as a resolution of necessity tonight?
The county auditor, Matt, is going to turn it around pretty quickly for me. If I'm going to state what I want,
Go for it, Randy.
what I want is a board that's going to go out and support it. Whatever the board chooses, you know, that's as the treasurer of this district and being, you know, working for you, my hope is that the five of you, whatever you decide, you all get behind it, even if you agree or not, you know, 100%. That's my dream.
So can I ask one thing if you could prepare us, for us? Mrs. Roland Miller was talking about programs that are mandated. Would you be able to come up with a list and the cost of unfunded mandates? Like,
we've been asked that one
I
before.
know,
That's a
but
tough one.
I think but it's a big one. You talk about,
Science of
post-secondary.
reading.
Well, you talk about, what is it now, CCP?
Well, let me. I was just looking at the last two May's forecast presentations, and if you remember, I've always listed the new positions that we've added. And this is last year's. A business teacher at the high school, mandated. 4 intervention specialists, compliance. Psychologist, load again, caseload. Occupational therapists, caseload. 2 elementary teachers, class size. HPI math teacher, HPI STEM teacher, enrollment. So again, load. Elementary assistant librarian, again, I think that goes to the Encore programs.
Schedule going.
High school health aide.
Caseload at the nurse's office.
2 HPI monitors and a tier 1 IT tech. That was last year's list. And you probably don't remember this year's list, but if you want to hear it, I will
Yeah, go ahead.
pull that up if I just.
I think while you're pulling that up, I think what Mrs. Refford is trying to get to is a question, I think back to Mrs. Menke, which is what do we need to be looking at to understand? Again, I'd love to get us to better understand and agree with one another. And that $3 million is what, I guess what Mrs. Menke would you need in order to understand what that looked like, to cut $3 million from the budget?
Yeah, because I would say I don't need to see what that looks like from my perspective.
But when I ask Randy, like we talk about CCP, so how many kids do we have that go to post-secondary, college classes that the state does not reimburse, that we pay for as a district? I mean, that's a huge chunk.
And some of those teachers, there are teachers, we're paying for them out of general fund. Now, it reduces our cost for CCP, but we're still paying those salaries, right? So, and our CCP
And those
costs
don't count as full students either, so
They don't
that
count as full
period that they're in
students.
our building taught by our teacher, they don't count as our student.
Right.
So,
So that's something that we have to do by law, and the state gives us $0 for it. That's the stuff I'm talking about, that we need to have so people understand, that we're not doing that just because of the goodness of our heart. I mean, it's a great program. My goddaughter started college as a junior, graduated from Ohio State in 24 months. But who paid for that? Rightfully so. Somebody had to pay for it and nobody funded it.
I think the other thought too, as we wrap up, and this was a heavy conversation. It's an important conversation, not only for this board, but also for our students. their families and the staff that will be watching this. I think I'm really proud of the discussion this evening. I think the thoughtfulness that you had, the respect, trying to listen to each other, find that common ground to do what's best, I think really is something that shows the thoughtfulness that this board has. And I think it represents many elements of the community, because the community doesn't come into these decisions with one mind and one thought. And what you're hearing today is the conversations that's happening at the barbershops and at the stores and at farmers market and where people gather. So I think it's great in some respects that people see this conversation happening here, and they're going to pick out things that each of you have said and said, it's all about that, or we need more of that. But at the end of the day, we have to come together, because I think we all recognize that even with the limitations that we've all acknowledged, this community, one of its greatest resources are the schools. And the river's a great resource, and you have to take steps to protect the river and to make sure that it is going to be there for not only the people today, but for the next generation. I would argue the schools are an invaluable resource to this community. And we have to take steps to protect that and to balance it and thread that needle, because there are great levy plans, and they're the ones that get passed. So we have to find that right balance. And so I think this process goes a long way to demonstrating that this is an independent board. You have your own thoughts and ideas. You can see them kind of shaping as you're doing this. And I think that's really important to highlight. I think it's something that, we didn't get to, consensus this evening and saying this is what we've done. But I think the success of this meeting and the third meeting in a row where we've wrestled with this, where you've wrestled with this, and I think it reflects what the community wants from its elected officials. So I think this has been a great discussion. I think it's a great example of the process and how it should be. And, and I think people will respect that and value that as we move forward. And to Randy's point, at the end of the day, when the dust settles, this board speaks as one. And so that's one of the challenges with being a board, and it's going to be really important that voice, echoes into the community saying, this is important. We went through a process. I shared my concerns. I wanted this. We got this. But this is where we need to be as a community, and we need to protect this resource. And my hope is that when we get to the end of this process, that's exactly where this board is, because we need this board to be there. So,
can I add one other thing? It just hit me. We talk about the voters having a voice, and they should, and they do have a voice. They elect board members every 2 years in addition to the levies. So, the 5 of you are part of that, right? You were elected for a reason, and I've been in your seats. Before one anecdote, I was on a levy campaign, passed a levy by 4 votes, but that spring they eliminated spring sports, and that was in 2005. The district never recovered. They lost 300 or 400 students open and rolled out, never came back. And it's still the best performing district in the area at the high school level, but it's not the same. And that's the challenge. But the 5 of you individually, every 2 years, the voters have a choice to put who they want on the board to represent their views along with the levy. So I think that when we talk about having a voice, you're it. I mean, each of you talk to different constituencies. There's probably some overlap, but it's something just to think about. But just if there's other information you need, I feel like the more we give, it ends up layering the complexity, but it's not an easy decision. And I'm going to echo what Mr. Hostler said. The best plans would be the one that's going to pass. Right.
I thought that was March.
Yep.
Yeah.
That one was outstanding.
And you heard it from the board members to you too. Thank you very much for the responsiveness, the data you've provided, the presentations to help guide us through this conversation and give us what we need to do this. And my fellow board members, great discussion. Everybody putting your viewpoints out there boldly in a healthy, constructive way. is good for this community. So we will do this again on June 27th, 6 p.m.
Yeah, not 6 a.m. 6 p.m.
Location probably to be determined, but
I would suggest if we can do it in here, just to
fine.
get it recorded.
I didn't want to commit that this room's available, so I get in trouble when I do that, so.
If nothing else, we might have to get Ms. Price to.
Okay. So we're going to table this discussion until that date. Any other, next item agenda, any other board discussion? Hearing none, we're going to adjourn unless there's any exceptions.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
Don't look at me.
And unanimous consent, I love it.
Unanimous consent, we are adjourned, yes.